while a girl was reading a book. She thought that throughout her whole life, she had always had a special talent. She never forgot the things she had seen. Thanks to that, every time she read, she couldn't avoid memorizing it entirely, remembering every line, every dialogue, every action done by the characters. But there was one romance in particular that the girl really liked, a book called Heal Me, My Lady. The protagonist was confident she could even remember the middle name of every random noble shown in the work, even the most irrelevant characters. Suddenly, a maid came running into the room with something in her hands, calling out the name of Lady Maleficent. The name that this servant screamed so frantically as she ran belonged to the villainess of the story, a woman named Arinda Maleficent. Looking at the servant, the protagonist thought that with those green eyes, freckles, and brown hair, she must be Arinda's maid, Anna, going to the mirror. The girl wondered if all of this was just a dream about her favorite book, and seeing her reflection, she thought Arinda looked exactly as she had imagined her Anna. A little nervous, asked if she had just woken up, pointing out that today would be the day of her entrance ceremony. Hearing that, the protagonist recalled the book and thought this dream must be right at the beginning of it, since it was the time of the annual entrance ceremony for the academy. So at that moment, Arinda and the main heroine of the story were still classmates. Approaching Anna without warning, the girl stared at her, thinking she had never had such a vivid dream before, surprised at the details. Everything felt so real she could even count all the freckles on the maid's face. At that moment, she should have realized what was really happening. Later, a teacher adjusted her glasses while scolding Arinda, stating that despite her being the daughter of the respectable Maleficent family, this was still the academy, thus punishing her with 3 laps around the field, walking like a duck. The girl was shocked by this. Out on the field, while doing it, the girl wondered how a teacher could make her take 3 laps around that huge space walking like that, and still convinced it was just a dream, she thought of letting it pass. Suddenly, Arinda felt a sharp pain in her leg, and bending down, she began to tremble in pain. She stopped for a moment, realizing that feeling pain in a dream was not normal. In the end, it took a whole week of pain and suffering, night and day, until the protagonist finally realized that all of this, as crazy as it sounded, was not a dream. She had really entered the book. Meanwhile, her legs were stretched out on the bed, her shins still sore from the effort. After that, already sitting in the classroom, Arinda thought that if this wasn't a dream, she would need to act carefully. She couldn't just keep walking around doing whatever she wanted without a plan. Thus, the girl wondered how she would return to her reality. If all this was just a dream, it didn't really matter who she was. But if this was real, it changed everything. After all, the girl, or rather, Arinda Maleficent, the character of the romance, was the villainess of the story. The same villainess who, in the prime of her youth, was executed by the hero. She thought she didn't know how to get out of that difficult situation, but she needed to make a decision, asking herself which path she should follow. She could try to bet on the theory that if she completed her role in the story exactly as it was written, she might be sent back, but she would have to be executed to conclude that path. Or she could simply sabotage the story she liked so much, trying to attract all the male protagonists and live a stable and long life there. Suddenly, someone shouted her name, pulling her out of her daydreams. It turned out to be the same teacher from before. Annoyed, asking how many times she had to say for her to pay attention in class, ordering her to leave immediately and take another lap around the campus. Breathing heavily, Arinda did as she was told, soon after, collapsing from exhaustion. At this rate, she would die of muscle pain before even being executed. She reflected that no matter how much she thought about it, the answer was clear. Standing up, Arinda said that she had concluded the result was obvious. And laughing, she stated there was no other way out. In her previous life, she hadn't even gone on a single date, and now that she was in possession of the villainess's body, how the hell would she be able to seduce anyone? Later, passing in front of a mirror, the protagonist thought that Arinda Maleficent was very beautiful, but compared to the heroine of the romance, Serena Eleanor, even she was nothing. Pure, elegant, and beautiful. Those were all adjectives that could be given to Serena. Remembering that, the girl began to blush, stating that if there hadn't been a hero, she herself would have hit on her. The truth was that from the very beginning, there had been no other path. Of all the royal families, the Maleficents were the most influential. And because the royal family wanted to consolidate its power and authority, she had already been promised to the crown prince, her engagement arranged before she had even arrived in this world. So there was nothing she could do. Unless there was a serious problem like treason, there was no way to break off the engagement. Something like that was out of the question. And while the crowned prince fell in love with another girl, Arinda had no means to do anything to stop it. The girl thought she had no other option and could only let the romance story unfold as close to the original as possible. And so, if her death was already predestined anyway, She wanted to make sure she did it in the safest way possible. Despite all this conviction, the protagonist still let a few small problems slip along the way. The next day, a young woman approached and called her name. Arinda remembered when she first met Serena in person. She was very sweet and charming. And while Serena handed her a book, the protagonist had forgotten Arinda, even with her previous determination to act as the villainess of the story, wondered how she could mistreat someone who was so kind. Despite that, the protagonist reflected that nothing could be done. So, just as in the original story, she began to torment Serena, sticking her foot out so the heroine would fall, sabotaging her experiments in class, and even trapping her in a tree while escaping. In the end, even her family was helping to drive Serena to bankruptcy, pushing her into misery, especially her older brother, William Maleficent, who had helped quite a lot. After all, he still held a grudge for being rejected by Serena, which served as the perfect excuse for his revenge. From the Maleficent family's perspective, Serena was someone who had stolen their daughter's fiancé and harmed the family's political ties with the king and crown prince. And because of that, even Arinda's father was happy to use her as a means to strike at the heroine, to the point where the protagonist struck her with a knife. The girl had to accept it, convincing herself that it was right to stick to the original story. As the blood flowed from the fresh wound on the girl's face, all Arinda could do was secretly hope that Serena would overcome it and still have her happy ending. Feeling bad about all this, the protagonist turned away, leaving the young woman behind, causing all that made her own heart break. Eventually, Arinda was condemned for all the crimes she had committed against the innocent citizens of the empire. The crown prince broke off his engagement with her and sentenced her to death for harming his beloved. As she was dragged by the guards, her father and brother, who had used her as tools for their personal revenge against Serena, abandoned her, leaving her to her fate. As she looked at the heroine's face, the protagonist regretted leaving that scar on her face, but that was out of her control. Finally, Arinda was reaching the end of it all. And then she remembered she was supposed to say the villainess's final words. She shouted at Serena, saying she hated her from the bottom of her heart. Serena was startled by this. Despite that, in her mind, the protagonist thought that it wasn't true, and that in fact she liked her a lot, finally saying goodbye. Now it would really be the end. She believed it would be great to return to reality, but if she was wrong, she would simply die right there. With the swing of the axe, her fate was decided. A slash resounded, but the outcome was different from what she expected. After all, what she received was not the return to her reality. Terrified, Arinda woke up screaming, holding her gasping neck. The girl wondered if it was still attached to her body. Anna, her servant, suddenly appeared. The maid asked if she was just waking up now, stating that today was the day of her entrance ceremony. Apparently, the protagonist had not returned to reality, nor even reached eternal death. Shocked, the young woman wondered if she was back at the very beginning of it all. She could still remember feeling the sharp blade and the pain at that moment. It had all been too real. Almost losing her mind, she pointed out that things had only been getting worse, questioning what would come next. Trying to stay sane, she thought that at least she had discovered that acting as the villainess only brought her back to the beginning. And now, instead, she would try to live a normal life. Stopping to think a bit, the girl came to the conclusion that this might not be so bad after all. While watching the wedding of the crown prince and Serena, Arinda thought that she only wanted to mind her own business and live her life. Noticing something, Serena looked at the protagonist. Smiling, Arinda thought that now that she no longer had to torment Serena, everything was much better. But as irony would have it, in the next instant, the protagonist was once again behind bars. The prince declaring that he didn't need 2 wives. After all, that would trouble Serena. Upon hearing this, Arinda was furious, wondering what was wrong with this guy. After all, he was still going to execute her even when she hadn't done anything. While the prince turned around, the protagonist sighed, questioning herself if her fate was already set, no matter what she did. Since she would die anyway, the girl finally kicked the bucket, insulting the prince. As she had nothing left to lose, she would simply do whatever she wanted. Making a face, Arinda stated that if the prince kept acting like that, he was screwed and wouldn't last at all as an emperor. The prince was shocked at first, but soon started laughing loudly. Approaching the bars, the man said she had gone insane in the face of her imminent death, adding that, unfortunately, he had already resolved all matters with her family. The protagonist was left speechless at all this. The prince stepped back laughing, ordering the knights to get rid of her. As she was taken out of the cell, Arinda thought that even in that life, her family had used her. She was simply tired of it all, of living as Arinda Maleficent. At that moment, all she wanted was simply to die in peace. And so, for the second time, the protagonist died. Suddenly waking up to someone calling her name, still lying down, she thought this was a drag. A little later, while Anna combed her hair, the maid stated that she shouldn't sleep too much at the academy, since she wouldn't be there to wake her. Basically ignoring Anna's muttering, Arinda thought that this was already the third time she was hearing this. Looking at herself in the mirror, the Maleficent family's traits were very clear. That sleek black hair, golden eyes that shone like liquid gold. She was even getting used to her new face at this point. Noticing her distraction, Anna asked if the young lady was listening. Sighing, Arinda remembered that in the first 2 times she had answered this, her replies had been rather unenthusiastic. Putting a smile on her face and lying blatantly, the girl said she was listening. Hearing that, the maid was happy Anna had been the servant who stood by Arinda until her bitter end. She had even done more than her duty, going so far as to torment Serena at Arinda's request. Shortly before the protagonist's execution, it had been Anna's turn. A guard read the execution order while the maid trembled. She called for her mistress, but the next instant, with the swing of the axe, her head was no longer attached to her body. Back to reality. While Anna finished dressing her, the girl thought it was really shocking to see someone who had already died twice, standing there, bothering her once again. On top of that, she thought about how surprising it all was. Looking up, the girl reflected on having been transferred into a romance, dying twice and being stuck in a time loop. Arinda thought that if God didn't want to take her back to reality, at least he could let her be reborn as someone different. In her mind, she imagined holding God by the neck and asking why he had given her this body, asking what the hell he wanted from her. After all, whether she changed the original story or not, she always ended up dying. At that moment, Anna said she was sure she would do well on her own, but asked her to just listen to one thing. Still in her mind, the protagonist thought those words sounded like tips given by a guide in a game. After all, even if some details changed between loops, that line always remained the same, just like her death. Anna then stated that the name Arinda carried a lot of weight. Because of that, some young nobles might show interest in her board. The protagonist thought that this would only last until they saw Serena for the first time. Anna continued, reminding her that she already had a fiancé, the Crown Prince, and therefore should treat all others only cordially. Annoyed, she thought that in truth, the one who betrayed her first and replaced her with another was precisely her fiancé. Remembering her, Arinda concluded it was impossible not to recognize her perfect beauty, almost justifying the betrayal. But the real problem was the prince and his horrible personality. That idiot had killed her twice without the slightest consideration, as if it were the most trivial thing in the world. Approaching and grabbing her hand, Anna claimed that every action she took would be observed by the Maleficent family. Thinking of her family, Arinda acknowledged that Anna was right. Everyone in the family, those cunning and selfish weasels, would always be watching her. Both the Crown Prince and her own family were like curses haunting her existence. Annoyed, remembering that if it weren't for both of them, she could have lived a long and happy life, wishing she could just abandon everything and escape to the mountains, but she quickly let the idea go. After all, where could she go being just a 15-year-old girl? She also considered the possibility of throwing everything away and trying to break off the engagement, but her family, hungry for power, would never allow that. The maid then told her that she should always keep herself upright and brave. Hearing that, the young woman thought it was fine. The protagonist was destined to die again, but this time, she would do it with her head held high and doing everything her own way. She decided to forget about the Crown Prince and everyone in the family. Since she would die anyway, at least she would do whatever she wanted first. After all, what worse could happen? Death was already becoming routine. Everyone else could jump off a bridge if they wanted. She would now do things at her own pace. Renewed, Arinda began her day with a smile on her face, only to immediately be dragged away by Anna, who ignored her protests. The maid pointing out that the girl should say goodbye to her father before leaving. Being carried away, the girl thought he didn't have much to say anyway. After all, the protagonist had already gone through all this twice. Basically floating, she still thought she would let it slide this time. Since Anna had died on 2 occasions because of her knocking on the door, the maid announced the presence of young Lady Maleficent and explained that she was there to say goodbye. From inside, the man asked them to come in. Hearing his voice, the protagonist thought with disgust that just that brief sound already turned her stomach. Upon entering, her father asked them with a smile if she was going to the academy today. Then, gesturing for the girl to come closer, Arinda knew that smile well. That false and despicable smile. Seeing that the young woman didn't move, the man said he had ordered her to come closer. The protagonist smiled for a moment, and letting out a short laugh, she sarcastically questioned what would happen if she didn't want to do it. Surprised by her change of attitude, the man irritably asked where this boldness came from to speak to him that way. Mocking, Arinda retorted that it wasn't what she expected to hear from a father who had forgotten his own daughter's big day. Smiling, the girl thought to herself that she was the only daughter of the Maleficent lineage. Not to mention that technically she was the Crown Prince's fiancée, therefore he wouldn't dare to bother her the wrong way. In other words, the power was in her hands. Trying to justify himself, her father replied that he was a busy man and didn't have time to pay attention to such details. Gesturing, Arinda said it was fine and that she shouldn't give them much importance, only commenting that he shouldn't forget to give her a good allowance as compensation. The girl thought that until now she had deprived herself of all the fun, but this time she was there only to do whatever she felt like doing. Hearing that, her father just stared at her in silence, in disbelief. Arinda thought she was just on her way out, then walking down the corridor humming while hoping her father would just send the money, wondering if next time she should ask for double A. Little later, already in a carriage, the protagonist arrived at a huge place. Looking at the site, the girl thought it was her third admission there. She compared the situation to taking the same college entrance exam 3 times and being sent back to the beginning just as the results came out, even imagining the scenario of waking up again on exam day screaming that she had failed. But Arinda thought that in fact this situation would be better, since in a normal exam at least, she wouldn't be at risk of death. Anna said her tearful farewell, asking her not to forget to write to her. Even though it was the 3rd time she was hearing this, the girl still appreciated her attitude. She thought it seemed she had arrived early since no one was in sight, wondering what she could do to kill time. So, the young woman began to look around, searching for something, and thus she came across a fountain wiping off the dust. The girl sat down, remembering it was the same place where she had once pushed Serena. The memory still fresh of how the girl had looked so beautiful in that moment. I don't know about you, but I think she's aiming for the other side. As if to prove my point, the protagonist pointed out that being beautiful really was the best. There was always something new and thrilling to see. No matter how handsome the prince was, comparing him to Serena was out of the question. They were in completely different leagues, especially when you take into account his rotten personality. Lost in her thoughts while twirling her hair around her finger, she remembered that there were many other boys around Serena. Thus, not noticing someone approaching spinning her fingers, Arinda wondered if it really had to be a guy with Serena, while imagining if maybe it couldn't be her in that place instead. Suddenly, someone touched her shoulder. Startled, she screamed and shrank back, the person apologizing for disturbing her. That person was none other than the source of her thoughts, Serena. Awkwardly, Serena asked if she had scared her. Nervous and shaking her head fervently, the protagonist said she hadn't. The girl was surprised that Serena had arrived early at the academy, and remembering the text from the book, she swore that Serena was usually the last to arrive at the banquet hall. Realizing she always got tongue-tied around her, Arinda remembered she wasn't supposed to act that way. But right after, she recalled that she had decided to live her own way, and that the Arinda from the original romance no longer existed. So, with a smile, she greeted her and asked how she could help. With more freedom now, the girl could be as friendly as she wanted. Smiling almost to the point of glowing, Serena asked for help finding the banquet hall, since she was terrible with directions. Seeing that, the girl blushed immediately, that innocent smile being too much for her heart. For Arinda, it was like standing in front of her favorite celebrity just inches away. She reflected that she had no idea the story could begin so differently and never imagined talking to Serena so soon. Noticing something, Serena commented that the girl was also wearing a red ribbon like her nervous. The protagonist said she believed so, but mentally she was nearly dying of embarrassment, wondering what kind of answer that was. Imagining suggesting to Serena that, since they were both first years, they should drop formalities and become friends, walking hand in hand, smiling and being best friends for life. Slapping her own face in embarrassment, Arinda thought, how could she even consider saying something like that? Before she could say anything, Serena took the initiative and asked if she would like to be her friend, speaking the very words the protagonist was thinking, leaving the girl confused. Smiling radiantly, Serena said it seemed like fate was at work, asking what the girl thought about that. The protagonist was left speechless, but smiling, she said she would love that. The young woman then introduced herself as Serena Eleanor, also asking who the protagonist was. Receiving the reply that she was Arinda Maleficent. Surprised, Serena said that then she was the crown prince's fiancé. The protagonist noticed this made her a little uncomfortable, so she quickly reassured her, saying she didn't need to worry, since now they were only academy students. Hearing that, Serena smiled and said she was very nice. Hearing this, the girl turned her face nervously, saying not as much as Serena thought. After all, in the previous loops, she had bullied the young woman while trying to return to her reality. But Serena quickly stated she was very good at judging people's character and that she should believe her because she really was a very good person. Arinda, uneasy, thought that couldn't quite be true. After all, of all people, she had still chosen the crown prince in the end. Serena asked Arinda which school she was in. She replied that she was in the School of Magic Smiling. The young woman said she studied there too, which meant the two would be classmates. Seeing this, Arinda remembered she had tormented her and then acted as if she didn't exist. But even after that, in this loop, Serena said she was happy to know they would study together. With a smile, Arinda said she was happy too. While talking, they arrived at the banquet hall, the protagonist pointing at the entrance while Serena stopped behind her a little uneasy. She commented that there was still plenty of time and asked if the protagonist would like to take a walk instead of just waiting there. Excited, the girl pointed out she would love that, then suggesting they just leave their things inside first. Serena agreed, thinking it was perfect. Spending this time with Serena made everything feel so different. In her first loop, the protagonist had shouted that she hated her with all her heart and treated her badly for quite some time. And the second time, although she hadn't harmed her, Arinda's fate hadn't been the best of all. But now, less than an hour after meeting, they were here as friends, entering the hall together. As Arinda opened the door, Serena commented that they were probably the first to arrive. But to the protagonist's surprise, upon looking inside, the crown prince was the first thing in front of her, who immediately spoke her name, commenting that frankly he was a little shocked to see her right there. The prince's name was Noah Hensley Pon Edmund Curious. Serena asked from behind Arinda if there was someone inside, since it seemed she had heard a male voice. Quickly, she denied it, claiming there was no one inside, and that at most it was just a dog barking, leaving the prince dumbfounded. While he complained about the inconvenience, Arinda slammed the door right in his face, leaving Serena not understanding anything. Happily holding her hand, the girl said they should go now. Laughing, the girl thought that had been very satisfying. Seeing his reaction to being called a dog had been worth every second, reflecting that no matter what she did, her death wouldn't change. So at least she decided that, for now, she would enjoy provoking him as much as she could. The two went to the garden, with a flower in her hand. Serena commented that it was beautiful. Irritated, the protagonist wondered how to keep that idiot crown prince away from her forever. But she concluded that, as just a villainess, she couldn't have much effect on the final outcome. Shaking her leg nervously, she believed that inevitably, Serena would fall in love with the crown prince. And while the girl smelled a flower, enjoying its fragrance, Arinda remembered that her head would eventually be cut off for whatever reason, thus restarting the cycle of death again. And sighing, she thought that if reincarnation existed, maybe it would happen sometime. Seeing that she was lost in her thoughts, Serena waved in front of her, finally getting her attention. Then she asked if by any chance the girl was having problems. The protagonist replied that there was nothing and asked the reason for the question. Serena explained that earlier she seemed to be in a good mood, but now she seemed different, a little down. Then asking if she was really okay? A little awkward, Serena commented that she had a certain ability, but stumbled a bit when trying to explain. Hearing this, the protagonist remembered Serena's magic specialized in reading other people's emotions. It was with this that she had been able to read and approach even someone with a heart as cold as the prince's. But something was different, because in the original story, Serena didn't want to reveal her powers to anyone. The protagonist then said that if she didn't want to tell, she didn't need to. With that, Serena smiled and said she was very happy she had greeted her today, reinforcing that she really was a good person. Then, she handed her a flower and asked her to accept it, adding that the petals of that flower reminded her of her eyes. Still saying that Arinda was very beautiful, almost crying with joy and blushing, the protagonist mentally wondered if by chance, the girl also remembered the original story and was actually just trying to kill her in revenge by giving her a heart attack with so much cuteness. Looking around, Serena noticed that all the other academy students were arriving, then asking if they should go back, which Arinda agreed to. Standing up, she thought uneasily that now was where the story officially began, where Serena would meet all the male protagonists in the banquet hall, and most importantly, when she would finally run into the crown prince. When in the story, she ran into the hall, and everyone murmured at her entrance, until finally she noticed the prince, who asked what all the commotion was about. Then, when Noah looked forward, seeing her face, she would fall in love at first sight. Remembering all this, Arinda thought that although she had liked it when reading the romance, now she knew that the crown prince was nothing more than someone full of himself. Arriving at the hall, Serena commented on how crowded it was, also mentioning that if they had left their baggage there, they would have faced many problems. Entering inside, they looked around, noticing that almost all the seats were already taken. Noticing the stairs, Serena said maybe they had arrived too late, but the protagonist replied no, claiming that everyone was just staring at her, then immediately pointing out a place to sit. Suddenly, heavy footsteps began to echo from the back, the crown prince walking in their direction. Seeing him, Arinda wondered if he was trying to approach Serena in another way, but something seemed wrong. Suddenly, he grabbed her hand, and pulling her close, the prince called her by name, and angrily questioned how she dared to run away after treating him like that. Surprised, the girl wondered what the hell that was. Thinking he was crazy, After all, he was doing this in the middle of the hall. While failing to free her hand, Serena called to her, not really understanding. But upon noticing the prince's gaze, she saw his red eyes. Then twisting and wishing good luck to Arinda, as if an assault scene wasn't happening right in front of her. Confused, the protagonist realized the girl had understood everything wrong. Without even having the chance to explain, the prince began dragging her. Apparently, the girl must weigh 5 kilos, since any character could just carry her around like a sheet of paper. She asked Noah to wait a moment after all the entrance ceremony was about to begin. With a cold look, he threatened her, questioning if she wanted her head cut off for insulting the prince. Irritated, she thought it wasn't as if Noah would do that now. And practically, she was already almost used to this scenario. Trying to break free while being dragged around, Arinda thought this was already considered assault, wondering if they weren't taught good manners in this world, still mentally calling him a damned prince. Reaching a corridor, she was finally released and complained that her hand hurt, her wrist still marked from the grip as her eyes watered a little. The prince stated that she knew very well what she had done wrong. She retorted, saying that the only thing she knew was wrong was that they were about to miss the entrance ceremony. With his hands in his pockets, the prince asked how she dared to be so rude to him, questioning if by any chance the girl wished to die. Irritated, the protagonist asked on what grounds he threatened her with death inside the academy, pointing out that he should stop being so petty, then reminding him that he had been forced to enroll there as a student because of a problem he had caused. The prince was shocked, asking how she could know about that. The reason was obvious. The protagonist was an avid reader with a photographic memory. She easily recalled that in a small incident, the prince had nearly decapitated a subordinate for a trivial reason. The execution never actually happened, but the king, wanting his son to become a more benevolent ruler, had sent him to the academy. Holding her hand out in front of the prince, she claimed she knew that. For the next 3 years, the imperial family would not help him at all. Then, ironically adding that if he still wanted to be treated as crown prince, fine. He warned her again, saying that Arinda would suffer the consequences the moment they graduated if she kept insulting him. But the girl replied that she would make sure to disobey him whenever she could. And shrugging, she stated that in the end, she would die anyway. The prince asked if she had lost her mind. Approaching with her face lit up, the protagonist joked, asking if they could break off the engagement in that case. With his arms crossed, the prince remarked that she was acting as if she wanted that. Hearing something, Arinda noticed that the ceremony was starting. Telling him she was leaving and laughing, she commented that the prince could find his way back alone. Thinking that now it was all or nothing, she ran back to the hall, leaving the prince confused. Noah believing the girl had gone crazy. Whether in real life or inside a story, the world would always be cruel. The protagonist knew that very well as she was forced to take another lap around the campus. She complained mentally about being the only one punished for being late to the ceremony. After all, the idiot had arrived late too, but simply went unpunished. Arinda thought she would make sure to make him pay for that before dying again. Out of breath, she stated it was a good thing she remembered how to use body-strengthening magic. Then she noticed someone nearby commenting that he was also being punished again. He was the only other character who always suffered punishments with her approaching excitedly. The girl asked if his name was Reynold, the fencing scholarship student, but the boy ignored her completely. Losing heart, she remembered never having seen him talk to anyone besides Serena in the original book. He had always just been a simple-hearted knight who silently protected her, an unfortunate supporting character who hid his feelings until the end. His name was Reynold Watson. The young man was her favorite character, but he had the problem of always being chronically late. Running up to him, Arinda arrived breathless, asking if instead of being late on purpose, the boy had just accidentally overslept. Reynold turned to the girl, glancing at her from the side, asking if talking while walking like that didn't tire her out. Cheerful, the protagonist thought that at least she had made him answer. She said her legs didn't hurt, but at the same time her breathing began to fail. And falling behind, the protagonist said they could chat a little. Ignoring her and moving on, Reynold advanced while the girl began to wither in the back, begging him to stop, then collapsing defeated on the ground. Getting up unwillingly, Arinda thought she had been saving her magic not to get caught, but hated being ignored like that. Then a purple aura surrounded her, and suddenly she was next to him again. And jokingly saying they were duck-walking companions, Arinda stated they could chat a little. Reynold was surprised that she had recovered her breath so quickly, commenting that she must have practiced a lot. Suddenly, the girl introduced herself and confirmed she already knew his name. In her mind, Arinda bragged slightly for knowing everything about his personality. Reynold commented that she had been late to the entrance ceremony yesterday, then asking if the girl was also on the fencing scholarship. Awkwardly, she denied it, explaining she was terrible with swords. But Reynold observed that without training, it would be impossible to control her breathing and move so fast like that. When she was about to tell him she had used magic, Arinda stopped for a second. Realizing her mistake, she knew the young man liked people with integrity and honesty, valuing hardworking people and despising the lazy and the liars. In other words, he hated people who took shortcuts in life, and her magic was nothing more than a trick for that, so she feared he would judge her for it. Imagining that Reynold would question her for cheating while she was being punished for her own mistakes, losing all possible charisma points with him. So, laughing awkwardly, she commented that maybe anyone could get a little stronger if they walked an hour a day. Hearing that, he wondered if just 1 hour would be enough. Sweating heavily, she lied again, correcting it to 2 hours. While Reynold looked at her intently, the girl almost freaked out inside. After all, she knew how much the young man hated lies too. She wondered if he would start hating her and tried to think of her next excuse, but he only said that the girl really should have tried sword fighting, adding that it was a shame to see her natural strength being wasted. That left her confused, not knowing how the conversation went that way. Reynold commented that he was in Class B and wanted to know which class she was in. Arinda replied that she was in Class A. The school division was as follows. Magic users like the protagonist and Serena were in Class A. As a swordsman, Reynold was in Class B, while the Crown Prince, Noah, focused on strategy, was placed in Class C. That reminded her of something. There was only one candidate for a main character in her class. Reynold mentioned that they would have the chance to switch classes at the end of the semester, asking her to consider it, but Arinda only reinforced that she was bad at fencing. To her surprise, he offered to teach her, and stated that with enough practice she could become a great swordswoman. The protagonist only thought in despair that she could barely run 100 meters, and that, if she tried to learn fencing, she would end up falling and cutting herself with her own sword. She tried to make up an excuse, and even though they had been standing still for minutes, she pretended to be out of breath again. Truly a move of extreme intelligence, one might say. Seeing this, Reynold stated that she was just lying, and the girl sighed, surprised at how observant he was. Suddenly, Serena appeared, calling for the protagonist. Seeing her sweaty, she offered her a handkerchief. The protagonist thanked her, but noticed that Reynold still hadn't left. Suspecting it was because of Serena taking the used handkerchief from her hand, he said that Arinda must really hate fencing, since she had lied about it. Serena asked if it was true nervous. The girl said that maybe she was just starting. In the background, Reynold calmly used the used handkerchief to dry himself. Arinda then entered a mental dilemma, wondering if she should just confess that she had used magic. And when she finally decided to tell the truth, Reynold commented that she would certainly enjoy it if she allowed him to teach her. She was confused for a moment. The young man still reassured her, saying they could train together, and that there was nothing to worry about. Reynold looked at her shyly while waiting for an answer. Seeing this, the protagonist thought she had almost forgotten. She really did have a weakness for handsome protagonists. And blushing, Arinda happily accepted. There go my hopes that she would end up with Serena, who, by the way, didn't understand anything that was happening. Serena then asked them if she hadn't just said that she hated it. Awkwardly, the girl said she would give it a chance. Thus, Reynold scheduled the start of training for the following afternoon. The protagonist said that sounded great. However, inside, she knew that no matter what, the boy would end up falling in love with Serena in the end. Doubting that her presence could change, that Serena commented that the boy from earlier had a fencing scholarship, remembering having seen him receive the award on stage the previous day. Asking if it wouldn't be dangerous to train with someone, since their levels were so different. Arinda wouldn't last long before collapsing in training, so she was worried for her friend. But the protagonist only said she would be fine, adding cheerfully that she wanted to get closer to Reynold since they had talked a little, and he had seemed like a good person to her. Serena advised that if she got too tired, she should make sure to take a break, which the girl agreed to. The protagonist wondered mentally why Serena showed so much concern regarding Reynold, since she couldn't remember ever seeing her act that way before. Suddenly, the sound of the bell rang over the loudspeakers. Arinda commented that it was the warning signal and that they should go in. The young woman then asked if by any chance she knew everything about the academy. The protagonist thinking to herself that it was basically that. After all, she had already graduated there twice, but she only said she knew the academy because of her brother, who also studied there. Hearing that, Serena commented that she had seen someone with golden eyes several times throughout the day. The boy kept winking at her repeatedly, and had even blown her a kiss before she came to meet the protagonist. Thus concluding that it was probably her brother embarrassed, she only apologized in his name, mentally calling him an idiot. The two then headed to the classroom. Serena commented that the current period was about basic notions applied to magic, pointing out that she was looking forward to it. The protagonist said she felt the same. Suddenly, someone shouted Arinda's name from the back, someone commenting that it was Tom Wilson from Class C. The young man nervously tried to deliver them a message from His Highness, being interrupted when Arinda asked if it was something about Noah Tom, then shouted that the Crown Prince was calling for her. She found it strange that she had been called instead of Serena, wondering if the story was changing. Sighing, she said she also had some words for him. Then, opening the prince's classroom door with a bang. Upon seeing her, some students whispered about her, some claiming she was the crown prince's fiancée. Arinda then said that, prince or not, if he wanted to say something, he should at least come personally. While Noah was still confused, she added ironically that she only came out of concern since he couldn't bother to walk there himself, joking that she feared his feet had disappeared, but was glad to see his legs intact. Still complaining that thanks to someone, obviously the prince, the protagonist had to walk like a duck around the entire field, pointing out that next time, His Majesty should join her. The prince's face darkened and Arinda stormed out, slamming the door furiously. As she walked, the girl thought that if he wasn't satisfied, he should come meet her himself. Right after, someone approached her, the man saying he was impressed with her speech just now. Since the girl said nothing, the young man smiled, asking if she didn't recognize him, claiming they were in the same class. She only identified him coldly as Luke Oscar. He was yet another of the male protagonists of the novel. My God, what a big cast. Luke smiled in satisfaction, saying he expected to be recognized anywhere. On top of that, he was an incredible archmage. The girl only asked him to get out of her way since she was late for class. He pointed out that in that case, he was late too. The protagonist asked if they couldn't just walk to class together. In her mind, she thought nothing good would come of this. Getting involved with him was trouble for sure, especially considering his reputation as a born egocentric. Getting closer, Luke then asked her for a favor. Irritated, the girl asked if she could just refuse. He insisted she wouldn't regret it and could trust him. Arinda thought that maybe Luke was trying to get closer to Serena through her. Shaking her head in denial when she was about to refuse anything, the young man interrupted her, asking her to be his partner. Both stared at each other for a second, both confused. Luke then suddenly started laughing, asking if by any chance Arinda thought someone like him would need to ask for such a favor. Awkwardly, she didn't understand what was so funny. Then Luke reinforced that he wanted to be her partner. He reminded her that for the next 3 years, every student should choose a partner from Class A to help each other and grow in magic. Creating a soap bubble that showed the two of them popping it with a gesture, Arinda refused, saying they weren't a suitable pair. Luke insisted it would be a good deal, stating that with him, high grades would be guaranteed, but she stepped away thanking him. Thinking she intended to be Serena's partner, he followed her, asking why she wouldn't accept. After all, in his mind, this was a rare opportunity. Pointing out they would be late, the protagonist asked if they could hurry up walking quickly. She wondered what that was all of a sudden. After all, she hadn't even done anything to Luke. The next moment, something flew toward her. She turned, quickly blocking and dispelling the magic. Recognizing the magic, she realized where it came from. Shouting at Luke, the girl asked what he thought he was doing. The young man only laughed, saying it wasn't easy for a novice to dispel a spell cast by another. Arinda realized she had fallen into his trick and thought nervously that maybe she had exposed herself too much. Luke insisted again that they become partners. Later, while stirring a cauldron, the protagonist thought it would be normal for some people to change their attitude toward her, since she was acting differently from the original story. But Luke's change didn't make sense. And on top of that, he apparently knew about her magical abilities. Like a parrot, the boy repeated his request. While she wondered why he was being so persistent, he started repeating the phrase again and again. Serena commented that the protagonist seemed irritated. Kicking her under the table, Arinda turned to the girl and said it was nothing much. The kick was so strong that Luke even went a little cross-eyed, but he still repeated the proposal, shamelessly on his face. The protagonist asked if she hadn't kicked him enough. Luke replied that not enough to make him give up Serena, then asked why Luke had been insisting on this so much over the past few days. The girl said she didn't know, and Luke stated that he didn't need a reason to choose her. Arinda retorted that even if there was one, she would still refuse. Laughing, the boy said that was exactly why he wouldn't explain. Luke laughed loudly without a care. The two girls decided to ignore him and went back to focusing on their magic practice. Serena asked what the next ingredient was. The protagonist silently watched Serena, thinking that she looked even more beautiful and lovely when immersed in her own thoughts. Turning to Luke, the girl was sure that he too must have been falling for Serena's beauty. But instead, what she noticed was that his entire gaze remained fixed on her, like a lion staring at its prey. Smiling, he teased her, repeating the same question. But Arinda only shouted no way. He murmured that the girl didn't even flinch before his handsome face. The protagonist didn't know how he could be so shameless and persistent. She could only sigh, since because of him, they had to share all the projects as a trio. Serena interrupted and asked Arinda what she would do about that thing today. The protagonist asked what she was talking about, whispering. She said it was about the conversation with Reynold. reminding her how he and Luke had almost fought the previous day. It turned out that yesterday, Reynold asked Arinda if she hadn't forgotten the scheduled training. She replied that she would be there. Luke, interfering, called Reynold naive for trying to teach a mage to use a sword. Reynold retorted that her natural physical strength could be improved with a little training. Laughing, Luke mocked him, asking if he really believed that all of this seemed very strange to the protagonist, because the one who should have been the center of the story was Serena. But in the past few days, it seemed that she herself had become the heroine. Serena, stirring a vial, then asked how the Crown Prince was doing. The protagonist was surprised to hear his name. Serena then explained that she didn't know what had happened, but when she passed by him, she noticed he seemed upset about something. Arinda wondered if it was because of her. After all, she had insulted him not long ago. Serena might have perceived his feelings in the brief moment they passed by each other. Repeating those words, the girl remembered something, and shocked, she screamed, asking if she had really crossed paths with Noah. Realizing she spoke too loudly, the protagonist whispered, questioning if he hadn't stopped her or at least asked her name. Serena denied it, claiming they didn't even know each other, and reinforcing that the prince was still Arinda's fiancé. There was no reason for him to be interested in talking to her. Awkwardly, the protagonist thought that in reality there were plenty of reasons for him to be interested in her. But thoughtful, the girl wondered how much the story had been altered. If the prince even ignored Serena, how many changes could her actions have caused? She feared that if things kept going this way, she might be killed without a trace before even turning 20. The protagonist then asked Serena what she should do, claiming she thought she had ruined her own life. In despair, the girl wondered if she should cast a spell on Noah to erase his memories or even kill him and run away. Serena held her hand and called her by name, trying to calm her down, saying she shouldn't get anxious over things that hadn't happened yet. The protagonist blushed upon hearing that Serena added that whatever happened, she would take care of her. Arinda believed she was right. After all, nothing had happened yet, and Noah hadn't even said anything so far. Maybe he was just thinking of breaking off the engagement, so she shouldn't be so negative. As if to prove she was wrong, someone suddenly appeared, calling her. When the three turned, they saw that it was the Crown Prince. He said that, at her request, he had come to meet her personally. Dark circles were very visible under his eyes as he asked if they could talk. They both moved away from there. Nervous and trembling, the protagonist tried to comfort herself, thinking she had no reason to be scared, since they were at the academy, where student safety was the priority. So there was no way he could just kill her now. Then questioning what she was afraid of, remembering she had already died twice and needed to calm down, trying to meditate like a monk and pretend she didn't fear her future. Third death, Luke appeared out of nowhere, asking if the atmosphere wasn't too heavy for someone who was just following her fiancé. Then, blowing in her ear, a little irritated, the protagonist wondered why he was following them. The boy then claimed he was only there because he was worried about the expression of his future partner, questioning if the two were going to duel or something like that. Arinda could feel that he was lying, so she asked about Serena. Smiling, Luke said he preferred to watch that since it would be more fun. Surprised, she asked how he could leave her alone, but Luke only retorted, saying that Serena was 15 and not a child, also pointing out that at that age, many of them were already engaged. Wanting him to stop teasing her, Arinda cast a spell on him, dodging the spell as if it were nothing. Luke said she was the only one he had any interest in. However, the spell kept going, now heading straight toward the prince and hitting him in the head. Smiling, the protagonist commented that she had almost liked him for a moment. The Crown Prince, surprised, brought his hand to his head and turned, then asking who the hell he was. The girl elbowed Luke in the ribs, leaving him breathless. She still said the young man was just a lunatic and not worth listening to. Forcing a smile while pressing the sore spot, Luke confirmed what Arinda had said, claiming to be completely insane. The protagonist said that wasn't a compliment. Noah stared at them intently, and finally stated that Arinda had made a fool of him the last time with her last attack, claiming that insulting a member of the royal family in public was a bold move. And with that, she couldn't expect to get away with something like that. Noticing his gaze, the protagonist even considered she might be executed right there, but quickly denied it, since Noah would probably wait until the end of the semester. But she was still unsure of what to do, thinking of the possibilities she could try to kill him first and flee, or just wait to die again. Just thinking about it put her in a bad mood. After all, they wouldn't even be in this situation if the prince hadn't killed her. Noah pointed out that Arinda didn't usually act like that before, questioning if she had really lost her mind. The protagonist angrily asked what difference it made to him. After all, he would end up killing her again anyway. Noticing something strange in her words, Noah grew confused about this having happened before. Turning away, Arinda wondered if he had bionic hearing or something. Since even when almost whispering Noah had heard her, Luke came closer, patting her shoulder and asking if the prince really planned to kill her. still wanting to know what had happened before that, but the girl only ignored it, convinced that sooner or later he would find some reason to execute her. Luke then pointed out that the two made quite a pair, asking if by any chance she regretted insulting him. She shook her head firmly in denial. Luke, smiling, patted Arinda's head, saying that was exactly why he liked her. While she brushed his hand away, the prince stated that he didn't understand her behavior, reminding her that insulting the heir to the throne was a serious crime. However, he didn't have the power at that moment to condemn her to death, and that, if she showed complete remorse over the next 3 years, the matter would be forgotten. Hearing this, Arinda exploded in anger, outraged by the request. Then, showing him the middle finger, a moment later the bell rang. While the girl clenched her fist, Luke watched her wide-eyed, then holding her hands and stating that the protagonist was exactly his type. Indifferent, she replied that she wasn't interested in becoming his type. Luke retorted that it didn't matter, claiming this was about him and his feelings. Very mature, to everyone's surprise. Outraged, the girl stated that it might be hard to hear, but she also had her own feelings. The prince watched in disgust and repeated that she had lost her mind, insisting that even someone from the Maleficent family would be held accountable for insulting the royal family. Smiling, the protagonist asked if Noah really wanted to put the weight of the family name against her. He reminded her that she had a father and a brother, asking if she didn't care about them. Sighing, Arinda said she couldn't care less about the two. After all, in her mind, they were more than welcome to die with her. In both loops, she had lived in this world. Her family had only distanced themselves from her to protect themselves, still swearing that even if it wasn't in Noah's hands, she would still get her revenge, one way or another. When Luke opened his arms to approach her and declare himself once again, Arinda froze his feet, trapping him to the ground. Surprised by this turn of events, Noah stated that he had been told she hadn't even begun studying magic yet. Arinda was left speechless, while Luke said, impressed, that she had reached that level without any formal training, and once again asked her to become his partner. Irritated, the protagonist asked what he thought about learning how to read the mood of the room and minding his own business. But the young man points out that, in fact, he was certain this involved him, and as he spoke her name, a faint glow surrounded them. That was a contract spell. Luke explained that becoming his partner was like being recognized by the magic tower itself, questioning if she knew the meaning of that. The magic tower officially functioned as a counterbalance of power to the royal throne, where neither could actively harm the other. In other words, if she accepted, not even Noah could kill her. The position of Mage of the Tower was prestigious and opened only every 20 years. In her past life, without any connection to Luke, she could never even dream of it, but she still doubted the reason for being chosen. Luke explained that the tower needed someone with her aggressive energy, pointing out that the current chief was sick, unable to lead the fight against the Emperor, still affirming that these battles were the only joy of the tower's mages, and that, without them, they were getting bored. The girl did not understand, but is interrupted by Noah, the same claiming that this was a ridiculous reason. Luke points out that no one would be able to touch her if she joined the tower. Arinda thought that accepting Luke's proposal meant changing the entire original story, but it also represented her chance to escape the cycle of deaths at Noah's hand. This could finally mean her survival beyond 20 years and the freedom to have a life truly her own. Decided, the protagonist says she would accept and become his partner. With that, the young man declares that on the condition of being his partner, he would grant her the status of Mage of the Magic Tower. The light around them intensify. Looking at Noah, he was perplexed. Arinda questions if now she truly had nothing more to fear. Holding her hand, Luke reminds her that, although the girl seemed willing to face the prince, now Arinda could not kill him either. Staring at Noah, she says that even if she could not kill him, she hoped he would manage to find another way to die. Then, Luke and Arinda are teleported from there. Noah watched the scene in disbelief, asking what they had just done. Back in the classroom, the teacher stared at the souls of the two students, indignant that they were not only late, but also dared to use teleportation on the academy grounds, pointing out that both should stay even after class. Awaiting yet another punishment, Arinda wonders if the teacher was insane. While making more rounds around the campus, Arinda questions if Luke hated her now. Laughing, he says he would never be capable of that. After all, they were partners. Annoyed, the girl turns, asking why on earth he had decided to use teleportation right in the classroom. The movement made her lose balance, almost falling. But before that could happen, Luke held her by the arm, and smiling, he says she should be more careful. He then says that since they were late, he wanted them to arrive quickly. Letting go of her arm, Arinda thinks to herself that she could not believe that person was the future head of the Magic Tower. Luke asked them why they did not use magic to strengthen the body, thinking that perhaps she did not know Breathless. The girl asks him to be quiet, Luke murmuring that this was because of a problem in using it in front of Reynold the other day. After finishing, Arinda was almost dead from exhaustion. Serena appears calling for her, and seeing that she was covered in sweat, offers a handkerchief. Arinda smiles and thanks her, saying she would wash it and return it later. Serena replied that there was no need, affirming that the girl must be very tired, but the protagonist insisted. Meanwhile, Luke notices someone approaching. The teacher scolds Arinda once more, saying that her family did not serve as a defense there. The protagonist nodded, remembering that was exactly what the teacher had said the first time. But back then, she had to do 3 laps around the field. This time, she was only punished with 1. Luke comments that there really was no special treatment there just because someone's father was a duke or something, affirming that he was exhausted. Turning to him, the girl whispers, reminding them that Luke had asked about the reason for not using magic. And then she snitches to the teacher, affirming that he had used strengthening. The teacher got irritated hearing that, scolding him, and even if he was a member of the magic tower, he would be punished with 5 more laps, with her personally watching. Incredulous, Luke looks at Arinda, cursing her for that. Serena worries that 5 laps might be too much, believing the boy would probably get sick. Arinda replies that he was always playing little tricks and now was tasting his own medicine. Serena, a little awkward, asks what the protagonist thought of her. Finding the question strange, the girl asks what Serena meant. She replies in a sad tone that for a long time she thought Arinda was forcing herself to go out with her, even without wanting to. But the protagonist quickly stated that it wasn't true, not understanding why she would think that. In her mind, the protagonist thought that regardless of what happened, even while angry at Noah, she had never blamed Serena for anything. In fact, as far as she remembered, her feeling was quite different. Suddenly holding her hands, she said that she really liked Serena. The young woman was speechless for a moment, and then, smiling, said she felt the same, being happy that they were friends. Hearing that, the protagonist blushed for a moment, then quickly turned and pulled Serena along with her. Serena asked where they were going. Arinda smiled, pointing out that she wanted to prove how much she liked her. Arriving at a bakery, entering there, the protagonist asked the shopkeeper to give her everything from one end to the other, leaving both the baker and Serena surprised. This was the girl trying to show how much she cared for her friend. Serena said she didn't want her to buy so many breads and sweets, but the protagonist only replied that she should have bought even more. Serena insisted that it was already enough, then suggesting that they share a bit with Luke as well, saying that he must be tired, not caring much. The girl said he would probably just use healing magic on himself when he was done and be fine. Serena then pointed out that since she was his partner, she should take care of him. Sighing, Arinda said that originally she was planning to be her partner. Remembering she had planned to ask that officially as soon as potion class ended, but the whole situation involving Luke and Noah had caught her off guard. Serena pointed out that if she wanted to be her partner, she could have said that directly. And even if Arinda wanted that, she still chose another path. And disappointed, she said that now there was no chance to undo it. A little awkward, the protagonist thought the girl wasn't exactly wrong. So Arinda said she understood, but asked what exactly that had to do with sharing bread with Luke. The girl called her by name, scolding her, and the protagonist quickly corrected herself, saying she would be happy to share the heroine, then explained that she knew very well why, but the other students in the class weren't friendly with them at all, and that's why she hoped maybe the 3 of them could spend more time together. At that moment, Reynold appeared in the hallway, immediately calling for Arinda. Noticing him, she greeted him. The boy only stared back at her for a while, but then extended his hand in a strange way. Observing that, the girl wondered if he was some kind of robot. Going up to Reynold, Arinda asked if he was coming from sword training, saying he must be tired. And when asked if he had eaten, the young man only nodded. The protagonist then tried to update him on the things that had happened, but ended up stumbling since she couldn't describe Luke very well. After all, the only adjective that came to her mind was to refer to him as crazy. Luckily, Reynold realized she was trying to talk about Luke Oscar Arinda, commenting that he was the boy who had made Reynold quite irritated. He confirmed. When the protagonist was about to apologize for that, he said it wasn't necessary, since he wasn't upset with her or anything like that, saying that it was his mistake for trying to force her to learn fencing, then asking for her forgiveness for that and extending his hand. She shook his hand and said cheerfully that it was nothing, shaking his arm vigorously, and pointed out that even without training, she hoped they could spend more time together. Reynold agreed, adding that he still thought it was a pity to let all her natural strength go to waste, but wanted to remain on good terms with her. The protagonist began to think that Reynold and Serena were very friendly with her, so they would certainly get along without problems. But when she was about to ask that, Serena interrupted her, asking if the boy would like to join them and eat some bread. A little later, with a tear on his face, Luke appeared irritated, calling her a traitor. But to silence the most emotional being in the universe, the protagonist simply shoved a piece of bread into his mouth. Eating the bread, he asked how they could have abandoned him like that, then pointing his finger at Reynold and questioning why he was there. Arinda scolded him, telling him to behave, while Serena only laughed at the scene Luke insisted, asking if she didn't know that mages and swordsmen were like oil and water. Retorting, she asked how he would explain magical swordsmen. Reynold stated that since magic was only used as a modifier, they were still swordsmen in essence. But Luke commented that it was the magical part that made them special, still pointing out that he couldn't believe he was spending his lunch break with those kids. Mocking, Serena retorted that it wasn't like he had any other friends to have lunch with. Outraged, Luke said that boy wasn't his friend. Seeing his behavior, Arinda laughed, commenting that he sounded like a child. The protagonist was happy just sitting and relaxing a little with these kids. She had never had the chance to really know them, and now she was there, chatting about random things and sharing delicious bread. And all this while Noah was completely out of the picture. The girl could end up getting used to all that. For some reason, Luke noticed something and stared at her. Sensing his gaze, Arinda wondered if she had provoked him too much. A little embarrassed, the boy said there was no point smiling like that since he was still mad at her. The protagonist asked if that was why he was looking at her that way. Luke retorted, asking what other reason there could be. With her finger on her chin thoughtful, she said, maybe it was just that he didn't like her smile. In one of the past loops, Noah had said he hated that smile of hers. The boy was surprised to hear that, and leaning closer, he whispered that something like that wasn't possible. But going back to his place, he crossed his arms and acting like a typical tsundere, said he was still upset with her. After all, those 5 extra laps he had to run were horrible. Reynold commented that if he trained hard, 5 laps would be nothing, asking Arinda about it, but she couldn't really answer, since she had used the convenience of magic that time. Noticing the swordsman hadn't realized Arinda had used magic, Luke called him clueless. Hearing that, the protagonist hesitated for a moment, fearing he would reveal something. So before Luke could say anything about it, she pinched him hard on the back. At that moment, Serena said she had almost forgotten to mention that on the first weekend of the semester, there would be a ball to welcome the new students. Reynold asked if that was really necessary. Serena replied yes, since they would all be stuck on the same path for 3 years, and that would be the moment to meet the rest of the class. Hearing about the ball, Arinda thought to herself that, in other words, there would be no more opportunities for Serena and Noah to meet, since at this point in the original story, the purpose of that ball was precisely to mark their first encounter. Reynold, startled, asked if they would have to dance rejuvenated by hearing that. Luke laughed loudly, surprised to hear a swordsman worried about footwork. The young man then asked if Luke by any chance knew how to do that. As they stared at each other, Luke replied that he was the best dancer among all the mages of the Magic Tower. But the swordsman pointed out he had never heard anything like that. But as far as the protagonist remembered, none of them danced well. After the meal, they said goodbye to Reynold. Arinda also commented that they should be leaving, but Luke took the chance to ask if the girl knew how to dance. The protagonist replied that she bet she danced better than him, but seeing him smile, she wondered why he looked so happy. Excited, the young man claimed that she was his partner. Pointing at him, Arinda asked Luke not to talk like that since he was making her regret it. Luke insisted, reminding her that they had helped her, and now it was her turn to help him, asking her to teach him to dance. Holding her hand a while later, a loud scream echoed across the campus, Arinda, complaining to Luke while they danced, telling him to stop stepping on her feet and angrily saying that was her right leg, not her left. With his arms crossed, he swore he was doing it right, questioning if she was really teaching him correctly. Serena intervened, saying she was sure she was teaching well, and that Luke was the one not paying attention. With her head down and sore feet, the protagonist agreed. Clapping her hands, Serena tried to motivate them. The protagonist asked why he was so motivated to learn to dance like that. Luke replied that he thought it was fun, and besides, he wanted to beat Reynold. Considering it a matter of pride, Arinda asked them to just give up and start focusing on something related to magic. After all, they had already been at it for hours and had made no progress at all. But he assured Arinda that he really was a good dancer, adding that since the girl was taking all the trouble to teach him, he could show her some of the Magic Tower spells in return. After all, they could come in handy the next time she ran into some idiot. After that, she asked if they should try once more, right after with their feet in sync. Something surprised her. While Luke guided her, she realized that he was suddenly surprisingly good at it, which was completely different from the original story. Luke smiled and said he had already told her he was a good dancer. The protagonist reflected that no one learned to dance like that in a single day, for he seemed like a master. While he patted her head, Arinda was going to confront him and ask something, but Luke only said that it was fun, teleporting away before he had to explain anything, leaving the protagonist outraged, cursing him mentally. At another moment, Arinda and Serena looked at some dresses that were available, wondering who had decided to lend them out in order of arrival, so only the ones in terrible condition were left. even though they had skipped dinner to get there quickly, so they would have to pick some clothes from home. Serena then reassured her, saying it was fine and that they just needed to follow the dress code. While searching, the protagonist found something. Showing a blue dress with a glowing face, she asked if Serena would like to try it on. Serena looked at it and asked if it would fit. Arinda confidently replied that yes. In her mind, she knew this because Serena used to wear the same dress every year, and Noah always fell in love when he saw her in it. Realizing her mistake, she closed her expression, asking if they shouldn't take a look at something else. Seeing her face, Serena laughed and said she would wear just that dress, since Arinda was the one who chose it. Serena commented that the state of the other dresses was awful. But hearing that, the protagonist held her hand and said she didn't need to worry about her. In her mind, she already had a plan. At the ball, several students turned in surprise, looking at someone. Various whispers were heard, people wondering why on earth a girl was wearing a suit. Hearing that, the protagonist wondered what the big deal was. Then William appeared from behind and asked what she thought she was wearing. Recognizing his voice, Arinda greeted him and replied that what she wore had nothing to do with him, since he had never been interested in her before. William, irritated, retorted that a debutante shouldn't act like that. She asked ironically if she should be more polite, then made a speech calling him dear brother and reminding him that they studied in the same academy, and even though he was bothered by her clothes, that party was to welcome the new students. Therefore, she wouldn't leave. Finally asking sarcastically if he wouldn't mind closing his eyes, William was furious and, freaking out like a spoiled child, threatened to tell their father about her indecent behavior. Arinda only smiled and said he could tell if he wanted. At that moment, Serena appeared calling her and smiling at her when she saw her. The girl praised her appearance. Holding her hands, the protagonist returned the compliment saying, "Serena looked very beautiful." Serena then asked who the boy behind her was. Turning and seeing William, Arinda looked discouraged. After all, her brother immediately blushed in front of Serena, looking like an idiot. As if a trigger had gone off in his head and trying to act like a gentleman, he greeted her, introducing himself as William Maleficent. Seeing this scene, the protagonist only wanted to run away, but Serena held her hand and, with a sweet smile, asked if he was Arinda's older brother, also pointing out that he looked familiar. William, trying to recover himself, said that apparently the girl was very close to his precious Arinda. That phrase left the protagonist outraged. He continued, stating that if Serena had any doubts or problems in taking care of his sister, she could feel free to come to him. But Serena interrupted him, firmly replying that this wouldn't be necessary. Noticing the stares and gossip around, and in front of everyone, she stated that Arinda was a kind friend who always apologized because of her brother. And since he always ran away before she could speak, she would take the opportunity to tell him something. Serena further revealed that she felt uncomfortable being followed by him and asked him not to do it anymore. William turned pale after so many scoldings, while Serena concluded by saying she didn't like to see her best friend embarrassed and thanked him in advance. Then, she called Arinda to leave the protagonist. Leaving, stuck out her tongue in provocation, while William remained furious. Laughing a little, the protagonist said that was amazing. Serena, nervous, replied that she hoped she hadn't caused problems and questioned if she should have accepted his feelings. Arinda assured her no, pointing out that in fact it was a pleasure to watch, while the protagonist grabbed a snack. Serena then wanted to know the reason why she had chosen to wear those clothes, commenting that it suited her. With a tray in her hands and smiling, the girl asked if she could dance with Serena. Serena quickly dodging. In her mind, there was another reason for all that. All the citizens knew about the Crown Prince's engagement, so if two people were called to start a waltz that night, it would be precisely her, and that scoundrel Noah. Serena called her attention, interrupting her thoughts, warning that he was approaching. She quickly asked Serena to go get food in another room, pushing her away from there. Coming closer, Noah insinuated that it was an unusual choice of clothing, asking if she wore that outfit just so she wouldn't have to dance with him. He had nailed it. Noah grew irritated, saying they couldn't kill each other at that moment, stretching his hand toward her, which left Arinda surprised. Noah then said that the girl really seemed to want to force the breakup of their engagement, so he was planning to take advantage of that. The protagonist didn't understand at first, but pulling a strand of her hair, the prince ironically explained that he would use it to show the solidarity between the imperial family and the magic tower Arinda. Startled, realized he had found a new way to torment her when she was about to call him crazy. That was when someone grabbed the crown prince's neck. It was Luke, who laughing said that if the matter was the union between the two institutions, Noah should speak to him, not his partner. Luke squeezed the prince's neck even harder, who shouted indignantly. The boy still joked, declaring that the future head of the tower was attacking the future emperor and asked what else it could be. Arinda watched in confusion, and Luke only smiled, signaling for her to step away. challenged the prince, drawing everyone's attention on the dance floor. The prince retorted, saying they were both men, but Luke replied that he could wear women's dresses if necessary. Taking advantage of her companion's sacrifice, the protagonist stepped away from Noah, moved and swearing to repay Luke someday. She went out to the balcony, and as she closed the door, she sighed in relief. Those events hadn't existed in her previous life. Everything was completely new. At that moment, she heard someone calling her name. Seeing Reynold, Arinda asked what brought him there. The young man replied that he wasn't used to large parties, adding that Luke Oscar was dancing with the prince while wearing a very strange dress. Laughing, the protagonist pointed out that he must have stepped outside just to avoid watching that scene. A moment later, the swordsman explained that, in fact, he had been practicing dance for some time because he didn't want to lose to Luke, and then be recognized as a better dancer than him. Extending his hand, Reynold asked if he could have a dance. A little surprised, the girl thought for a moment, and agreeing, she took his hand. Back in the ballroom, the two began to dance. Arinda wanted to know how he had learned to dance. Reynold explained that his fencing teacher had given them some private lessons. The girl realized it was probably the same teacher who had been watching them all this time with a smile on his face, then commenting that she never imagined a fencing master could also be a master in dance. The young man said his teacher had instructed him to move his hands and feet as if he were wielding a sword. Awkwardly, Arinda said she now understood why his dance seemed so aggressive. Reynold asked if that was strange, but she quickly reassured him, saying it wasn't. When the music ended, the boy admitted he had never participated in a ball before and thought his movements must have been clumsy. But bowing, he thanked her for the dance. Arinda replied that it was nothing, but in her mind, she couldn't help but notice that he didn't usually smile that much, wondering if it was some kind of mask. He said goodbye, stating that he was leaving since it was his bedtime. At least now the protagonist was sure he was still the same old Reynold. Tired, the protagonist thought that now that he had gone, she could rest a little, but before she could have the chance, with his arms crossed and staring at her indignantly was Luke. He asked how she could leave him and go dance with another guy. After all, it was almost a rule that partners started the first dance together. Mocking, Arinda teased him, asking if in fact he hadn't opened the whole ball when he danced with the crown prince in front of everyone. Still adding that, since he was wearing that outfit, she would only dance with him when he wore a girl's dress. The protagonist thought it was really fun to provoke him like that, but suddenly Luke said he understood, leaving her surprised. And joking, the mage asked if he should wear a slightly bolder dress next time. The girl regretted giving him that idea and changed the subject, calling him to go to the dance floor. He asked if Reynold had stepped on her feet during the dance. The girl said no, explaining that he surely must have practiced a lot. Then Luke asked who was better, him or the swordsman. The protagonist only said she couldn't compare a beginner with someone so experienced. And smiling, she went on, thanking Luke for taking the first step, because without him she wouldn't have managed. Luke commented that he would have loved for her to see the prince's face while they danced. Noah seemed about to kill him in the middle of the floor. After a while, Arinda asked him why he had asked her to be his partner. Luke replied by asking if he really needed a reason, telling her to look at their special connection, but she still wanted to understand the reason for that bond, and asked what it was. Luke called her cold for that. However, it really was strange from her perspective. After all, who would wear a dress in the middle of a ball to help someone they had only met a week ago? While leading her, he said that it was probably just his good nature. Arinda quickly called his name to scold him. They both knew he was anything but a saint. Then he added, saying that he really had only known her for a week, but that didn't determine the depth of his feelings. Then saying that he really liked her and thought she was the funniest person he had ever met. The protagonist thought he wasn't telling her the whole truth, but she didn't press the matter. At that instant, Serena appeared. Luke greeted her while talking to Arinda, asking if she could trust her partner at least once. Turning, he said they would meet the next day in class, leaving right after. When she arrived, Serena said she had been looking for her, apologizing. The protagonist explained that she wanted to get away from a certain spectacle. The girl realized she was probably talking about Luke's dress. Arinda then asked about Noah's reaction to all of that. Serena replied that he seemed in shock, and that as soon as the dance ended, he had left immediately. The protagonist thought with relief that at least that night Noah and Serena hadn't run into each other. In the end, it took her 3 years to manage to avoid the crown prince and prevent the two from meeting. She sighed silently and concluded that the night had really been pleasant, then suggesting to Serena that they go get plenty of food and return to the dorms, which she agreed to enthusiastically the next day. When the teacher started the class, the students' minds were still on the ball from the previous night. Each of them agreed on who the stars of the night had been. One of them, as expected, was Noah, the crown prince. But the surprise was that the highlight of the party had not been his fiancée, but rather Luke Oscar, the future head of the Magic Tower, who had even earned the nickname of the crown prince's girlfriend. The teacher called Luke's attention, telling him to wake up, provoking laughter through the room by insinuating that he was tired from the dance. Mocking him in a note, Arinda asked how it felt to be the crown prince's girlfriend. Annoyed, Luke threw the paper into the trash even with his back turned, then immediately gestured to the protagonist that he was watching her. Arinda looked on confused and asked what he was trying to say, but Serena interrupted, saying the teacher was watching her with a severe expression. The teacher called her name loudly, and Arinda stood up. Wanting the girl to fail in front of everyone, the teacher asked what the name of the commanding officer of the punitive expedition she had mentioned was. But to her surprise, the protagonist promptly replied that it was Reynold Saya. Coughing to regain her speech, the teacher confirmed she was correct and told her to sit down. Serena whispered, asking how the girl knew, since it seemed like a deliberately difficult question. The protagonist thought and laughed awkwardly, only saying that she had studied a lot, but in reality, that memory came from her past life and her knowledge of the story in the book. The class ended, and as soon as everyone started packing up their materials, Luke stacked several books on the table and announced that after lunch they would practice magic. And when asked why, he reminded her in a sulky tone that he had promised to teach her in exchange for the dance lessons. Seeing his sullen face, the girl thought maybe he was still mad for being teased earlier and concluded that he really was like a child. Soon after they were all together in the hallway, the protagonist asking what Luke planned to teach her today. Hearing that, Reynold wanted to know what it was about. Luke took the opportunity to show off and laughed, saying that besides being good at magic, he was also great at swordsmanship, even claiming that Arinda had asked to learn from him after seeing him demonstrate. Sighing, the protagonist realized he had lost the line again. To his surprise, the swordsman asked him to just leave the subject aside, saying he didn't believe a word of what he said. Still laughing, Luke declared that he intended to teach Arinda a magic spell that made a meteor fall from the sky, but that it was nothing special. Ari replied that it really didn't sound like anything special, and Serena added by asking him at least not to destroy the academy. Luke was indignant, complaining about those unenthusiastic reactions. The protagonist only said that maybe he should stop lying to them. Luke replied that no matter how big or small the lie, the partner should always trust him, because trust was the soul of any partnership. Hearing that, the girl asked if she really should do that. After all, he had never built any reputation for reliability. Reynold nodding in the background. Faced with that, Luke complained and asked if they were really against him, claiming he was on his way to becoming the greatest mage in the world, questioning if they weren't afraid of the future. Ignoring Luke's words, everyone started laughing, Arinda joking that he should have mercy on them. They walked together for a while, enjoying each other's company. Arriving at a classroom, Luke explained that the protagonist didn't have much magical power, but that didn't mean she lacked potential, and that on that day they would try to bring out the hidden energy within her. Turning to analyze the room, she asked how they would do that, but Luke said it was something simple. She just needed to summon all the magical energy she had. Arinda replied that she only knew how to use magic and didn't know how to summon energy itself, something that could be compared to knowing how to write, but that didn't mean someone knew how to craft a pencil. Luke said it was natural that she didn't know, since this kind of training was mainly given by the mages of the Magic Tower. He explained that the logic was simple, and asked the girl to imagine gathering all the energy into a sphere in the middle of her chest. The protagonist closed her eyes as he guided her. Then Luke warned that even if she felt her strength leaving her, she should be patient, assuring her that if something went wrong, he would intervene. Arinda repeated the words in her head, trying to focus on forming the energy sphere. A warm sensation spread, as if all the energy were disappearing and being drained, her mind almost as if it were going blank. At that point, there was a rupture. With that, Luke shouted for her to stop, holding her tightly. Serena appeared, running toward her in worry. The boy panicked, thinking she should have been fine, but something was wrong, not fully understanding Serena. In shock, spoke about her hair. Her once dark hair now white as snow. She looked at her own hair and wondered what was happening. Luke wanted to know if she could stand, while Serena asked if she was all right and if Arinda had hurt herself. Excited, she replied that she was fine, but that she felt things echoing in her mind and her senses were far too sharp. Hearing that, Luke stated she wasn't fine at all. Joking, the protagonist said she had probably turned into a grandmother, asking if she could have a mirror. He was impressed that this was what she was worried about. Serena repeated the question, wanting to know if she was really okay. Arinda said she was, but just felt a little sleepy. Running his hand along her back, Luke picked her up in his arms like a bride and told her to rest, saying she must be exhausted from magical strain. Resting her head on his shoulder, the protagonist slowly fell asleep, right after thinking to herself that she didn't remember the blanket being so rough, and that, until just before, she had been practicing magic with other people. Remembering everything, the protagonist opened her eyes, quickly sitting up suddenly. Seeing that, Luke joked that even when she woke up, she was dramatic, Serena scolding him and immediately asking how Arinda was, while she was confused about where that place was. Luke asked her to lie down again. Serena explained they were in the infirmary. A nurse had left the room, while Luke stated he would take care of her. She then placed a hand on her cheek. A little confused, the protagonist wanted to know how she had ended up there. Luke explained that her body hadn't withstood the pressure of magical energy, which had also caused the change in her hair color. But now everything had returned to normal, though the energy inside her was still unstable and it would be better to rest for a while. She asked if that happened to everyone at the beginning, but he explained that Arinda was a special case, because when a body reached its limit, the flow of magical energy usually ceased by itself. In other words, establishing a limit to the energy each person could draw. However, in her case, that limit didn't exist. Hearing that, the girl was surprised. She asked if what he meant was that her magical energy was unlimited. Hearing Arinda, Luke told her not to be foolish, because no matter if her magical energy was unlimited or not, she would still continue putting excessive pressure on herself. He added that on that day, the effect had only reached her hair, but next time it could affect her internal organs, stating that if her body couldn't withstand the stress, she would die immediately. Seeing Luke's face, Arinda thought that this was completely different, since even in her previous life, he had rarely gotten upset about anything in the book. She further reflected that now that she had learned to create magical energy, it would be easier next time, and thoughtfully stated that she would need to adapt her technique to be more efficient. Luke warned that it was a good line of thought, but irritated, he reinforced that resting was her top priority at that moment. Arinda awkwardly agreed. About 5 days later, the protagonist was walking back to school grumbling. All that time off had only been possible thanks to Luke, who managed to get the academy to give her that break. He went to an administrator, claiming that Arinda absolutely had to rest, or she could die. Finally managing to get authorization for her leave, the boy had given all the details of her sad situation to the headmistress. The protagonist thought sadly that her 5 days of rest were over and muttered that she hated the Academy Radiant. Serena appeared, saying she had taken notes for her during her absence. Seeing her, the protagonist jumped into her arms, saying that in fact she loved the academy. She reflected inwardly that she remembered everything even without notes, but she valued her friend's kind gesture. At that moment, Luke arrived and pulled the two apart. Asking if they could stop since the day had only just begun, Arinda greeted him with a good morning. Turning his head in surprise at that, he commented that she seemed different, asking if he should be afraid. The protagonist then reminded him that he had been one of the people who most eagerly wished for her quick recovery. Luke then said he had almost forgotten something, reaching into his pocket, then handing her a necklace. He explained that it contained a magic stone made especially for her, telling her that it would cast a spell to interrupt the flow of magical energy as soon as the symptoms began. Taking the necklace, the girl asked if that was really possible. Luke replied by asking why it wouldn't be. Despite his eccentric behavior, he was the youngest archmage in line to become head of the magic tower. Serena appeared laughing and pointed out that they had made it together. Hearing that, Arinda lit up, but warned Serena not to overexert herself. She held her hand and said it was fine, since her magical energy had a natural limit, still adding that Arinda would have done the same in her place. Luke was forgotten in the background, even though he had probably done most of the work. While the two hugged, someone appeared calling for Arinda. It was Reynold, who commented that he had heard she had been sick and asked if she was better. The protagonist smiled and nodded, replying that she had never been better. Reynold said that was a relief and added that, to avoid getting sick again, it would be a good idea to exercise regularly and build immunity. The girl thought that Luke would probably want to start a fight after hearing that, but to her surprise, the boy agreed. Arinda asked if something was wrong, since seeing him and Reynold not arguing was rare. Luke replied that by improving her physical strength, she could also increase her magical energy output, advising that she should focus more on her body than on magic itself for now, so it would be better if the swordsman trained her. Realizing she was surrounded, Arinda wondered if this was an attempt to force her to exercise. Reynold told her not to worry, explaining that he wouldn't put too much pressure on her. Her eyes sparkled with relief, and the protagonist asked if he really would do that. Reynold pointed out that since she was still recovering, they would start lighter, with only 5 laps around the track. Hearing that, Arinda wondered if this was some kind of modern torture or if she had somehow irritated him. Luke teased her, warning that he would be watching and that she shouldn't even think of using magic during training, so she wouldn't risk hurting herself. A little embarrassed, the protagonist said she had lied to him some time ago. Reynold said that if she was referring to using body-strengthening magic on their first meeting, he already knew about it. After all, Serena and Luke had told him Arinda was a little surprised, since she knew how Reynold hated lies, believing he would draw his sword and say he would never trust her again. But quite the opposite, he was concerned about her. Seeing her surprised expression, Reynold commented that he didn't understand why she seemed so shocked. Approaching, she asked him if, even knowing about her lie, he still wanted her to run 5 laps. The swordsman thought that since there were class schedules, they could reduce it to 3 laps. And ignoring her pleas, he said it would be better if she started waking up early from the next day, also asking if she would need to change clothes. While Reynold dragged her away, the protagonist protested, saying that if she ran 3 laps, she would already be drenched in sweat. Luke laughed from behind and said he would help, telling her not to worry. While the girl was being dragged off, Luke waved goodbye with a happy smile on his face. Arinda cursed him in her mind, thinking he was just as much an idiot as Noah. In another classroom, with her head slumped on the desk, the exhausted protagonist muttered that 5 laps were impossible. Serena asked if she wanted a little water. While apologizing, she said that Luke had explained that exercise was necessary to build the endurance of mages, so she couldn't make them change their minds about it. Arinda thought she would let it slide only because she was cute. Suddenly, the bell rang. The protagonist asked if the next period was magical formulas. Serena confirmed, pointing out that it would be with Professor Rachel. Already in the classroom, the teacher asked them to put away their notebooks and announced a surprise test. She also warned that the test would not be graded, so they could relax and take it calmly. While the teacher conjured something, all the students read the question in confusion. Arinda, upon seeing the question, was shocked at its difficulty. After all, it was far too challenging for such young students. The protagonist wondered if she should just improvise something or answer seriously, thinking to herself that answering them well would give her better chances of entering the magic tower, which could help her in the long run. The next day, Professor Rachel called the protagonist, reminding her that although she was from a prestigious family, she couldn't let this pass, claiming that if Arinda had any conscience, she would know the reason for being summoned. The girl, not understanding anything, replied that she had no idea. The teacher asked if she was pretending ignorance. Placing her hand on her chest, Arinda said that if it was about the surprise test, she hadn't cheated. The teacher countered by asking how she knew the reason, accusing her of being prone to deceit. The girl said that wasn't fair. After all, for what other reason would a teacher who wasn't her advisor call her like that? Rachel remarked that she was brave. The protagonist replied that when you hadn't done anything wrong, there was no reason to be afraid. Luke laughed softly in the background, and then whispered that her temper really hadn't changed. Arinda jabbed him with her elbow in warning. The teacher then explained that the question was extremely difficult, impossible for new students, except for Luke Oscar because of his background as a member of the Magic Tower. So, a student who had barely passed the entrance exam getting it right obviously raised suspicions, and that was why she suspected her, showing her old papers. These documents had been done by the original Arinda Maleficent. From the story looking at them, the protagonist thought about how she had been considered a poor student. Rachel added that, most importantly, Luke had agreed to be her partner, the only one capable of solving such a question, so that would be strong proof that she had cheated. Arinda replied that if she had cheated, she would have already been caught, since the teacher had cast a detection spell in the test room. The teacher insisted that Luke could easily nullify that spell, which they had already seen him do when he reflected Arinda's spells in the past. The protagonist pointed out that he wouldn't do that sort of thing, and neither would she. And almost pale, she begged Luke to say something, but he only told the teacher it wasn't worth so much effort for someone like her, and added that, as the teacher had said, he had only agreed to be Arinda's partner after many insistent requests. The girl wondered what kind of nonsense that was. The teacher remarked that they were always getting into trouble and asked if she could prove she hadn't cheated. The protagonist tried to say she could even take another test with a different question but was interrupted. Then someone said they couldn't hold back after hearing that, and that it seemed his fiancé had created a misunderstanding. The teacher asked Noah what he was doing there. The prince said he had been passing by when he heard that his fiancé was in trouble and asked if he could say something to prove her innocence. Rachel allowed him to speak. Noah declared that he believed Arinda had learned magic on her own after taking the academy entrance exam, explaining that since magic hadn't been part of an empress's formal education, Arinda had neglected it until then, but that she had a special special gift. When the teacher was about to argue, the prince confirmed that he had seen with his own eyes when she used aggressive ice-related magic. Rachel stated that she couldn't rule out the possibility that Noah was lying to save his fiancée. Noah then swore in the name of the emperor. Everyone in the room was shocked and silent at that. It so happened that in that world, swearing in the emperor's name was something bound by a magical contract that could only be done by someone who was a member of the imperial family. And if the oath were false, the mage would have to suffer extreme pain before drawing their last breath. So no one would dare make a false oath in exchange for their own life. The teacher apologized for doubting and said they would test again after the next class, claiming that her skill with ice magic would be enough evidence to guarantee her word, closing the matter at that moment. As they left the room, Arinda thought reluctantly that she didn't want to admit it, but Noah had saved her. Then Luke complained that because of that, they had missed lunch. The protagonist told him he could go ahead and grab something in the cafeteria. When he asked about her, Arinda only said she needed to talk to Noah. Leaning toward her, Luke commented that he would like to stay by her side, but she said the boy would only get in the way. Accepting it, he said they would meet again soon. The girl remarked that apparently God was not on her side. After all, she had prayed for Noah's death every day, but it had never happened. Noah asked if that was really a good way to thank someone who had just helped Arinda, retorted, claiming she had never asked for his help. The prince asked if there was anything else she wanted to tell him. Shrugging, the girl commented that he would never listen to her anyway, and that was why she had thought of taking matters into her own hands. But she said that since Noah probably already knew what she wanted, she would get straight to the point, suggesting they break off the engagement. Her mind rejoiced at finally saying those words. Noah replied with irony, questioning why he should accept that. After all, their engagement would be essential to building a relationship between the imperial family and the magic tower. So he couldn't just let an opportunity like that slip away so easily. Arinda said she already expected that, calling him a villain. Keeping his composure, the prince pointed out that she was in no position to call others that way. Irritated, the protagonist indicated that he was the cause of her being like this, provoking him. She said that if that was his only reason, he might as well socialize with Luke Oscar, since they had even danced a waltz together. Noah only warned that the boy hated him. Arinda, irritated, stated to Noah that the one who hated him most was her, swearing he would never find anyone who hated him. More? Noah commented that was very strange, and quoted a line where Arinda had said she was delighted to attend the academy with him. The protagonist was confused for a moment, but Noah explained that it was in a letter she had sent shortly before school started. Arinda thought that this wasn't in the original story. Getting closer, Noah stated that he was sure Arinda had definitely once liked him. The protagonist indicated that feelings changed, still adding that, to be honest, it wasn't like Noah had ever done anything for her. The prince stared at her without reacting, while she thought to herself that the prince probably hadn't even replied to that letter. Sighing, the girl pointed out that she wasn't planning to continue the engagement or be exploited as a link to reach the magic tower, adding that if he didn't agree to break the engagement, she would destroy the Maleficent house herself to be free, and that if even that wasn't enough to break the bond, she would cut all ties with the magic tower and kill him. With his hands in his pockets, Noah asked if there was nothing that could change her mind, and irritated, she said absolutely nothing. Turning away, she said loudly and clearly that she hoped that was the end of it and that she would be waiting for his answer. Later, Serena asked in surprise if that hadn't been too much. Arinda commented that her entrance exam scores hadn't been good, and the test was really difficult, so the teacher just ended up getting the wrong idea. Serena commented that even so, she had gone too far. While eating, the protagonist looked for Reynold, saying she hadn't seen him. Like a jump scare, the swordsman appeared behind her, saying he had been right there. Then Luke asked if he had come back after afternoon training. Arinda, seeing Luke's expression, scolded him in her mind, wanting him to stop. Reynold looked a little startled, then asked why Luke was suddenly being so nice to him. He explained that he was just trying to be grateful to Arinda for all the bread she had bought. Returning to the previous subject, Serena insisted that she still thought the teacher had gone too far, commenting that Rachel had called her to a common room and not to her office, so teachers from other classes could have misinterpreted it without knowing the whole story. The protagonist just laughed and said it was fine, that the matter had been resolved and that the teacher had also apologized. Serena replied that even so, she would still have to retake the test. The protagonist pointed out that she was glad to at least show she hadn't cheated. Holding her hand, Serena said she was very kind. The girl pointed out that she could say the same about her. All of this happened while Luke watched the scene, commenting that there wasn't a single day when they didn't create some big commotion. Changing the topic, Arinda said she wanted to ask Reynold a favor, and determined, she pointed out that she truly wanted to learn how to fight with swords, leaving both Luke and Serena surprised. After all, if she learned magic from Luke and swordsmanship from Reynold, then she would be fully capable of defending herself, preventing Noah from laying hands on her. Reynold asked if she only wanted to learn basic self-defense or if she wished to win in a duel. Still doubting how far she was willing to go in terms of training level, Arinda answered frankly that she wanted to hold her ground against people who had received imperial training. Reynold warned that it would be a lot of work, and that in that case they should intensify all the training, questioning if she was sure she wouldn't run away in the middle of the process. The girl shook her head, warning that she was fully in, and enthusiastically thought that she would endure until the end a little later. As if to prove her wrong, Arinda was already asking him to wait a moment, nearly surrendering. Her breathing ragged as her hands and sword trembled, Reynold replied that there was still training time left. The protagonist explained that she was about to collapse, on the verge of falling, but he firmly repeated that there was still time. Acting like a strict teacher, he kept repeating the same phrase, Arinda, wondering if the swordsman was some kind of NPC from a game. The moment he signaled the end of training, Arinda fell to the ground from exhaustion, but soon Reynold returned to his teacher role and explained that it wasn't good to lie down immediately, and that she needed to cool down gradually with some light exercise. Poor Arinda protested, saying that was too much, asking how he could deny someone begging for rest. After so much emotional blackmail, Reynold gave in and agreed. The girl explained that she had been sick not long ago. Reynold replied that Luke had said she needed training, but the protagonist quickly warned that Luke never knew the training would be that difficult. Reynold sat beside her and said that he had never taught anyone before, and maybe had been too hard on her, admitting that he might have been too harsh. Hearing those words, Arinda thought to herself that someone so big and handsome, being worried because of a person like her, made her third life much more endearing. But let's ignore the fact that he was only 15 while the protagonist had already lived several lives. Holding her hand, he said it seemed he had overdone it a little, then commenting that he would carry her back to her dorm. Arinda froze when she heard that, and even asking him to wait a moment, she ended up in a very embarrassing situation. Serena laughing at the scene from the side, Reynold added that they should also start a nutritional plan for her, claiming she was too light. She mumbled, and the boy continued, reminding her that she should take a bath and not just fall asleep immediately from exhaustion. Arinda replied with a, "Yes, sir." Then, leaning comfortably against his back, a month had already passed since she entered the academy. Serena and Noah still hadn't really met, so she was finally out of the endless cycle of the original romance. Arinda still reflected that obviously the possibility still existed, but at least for now, Noah couldn't kill her. Even so, if her fate was truly sealed, death could still find her in another way, whether through something outside the plot, like an illness, or even something ridiculous, like being run over by a carriage. Seeing the girl downcast at the door, Serena asked why she was outside instead of going in. The protagonist explained that she was just reflecting on the fragile and fleeting nature of human life and commented that one could die from anything. Hearing that, Serena smiled and pointed out that everyone was trying to live to the fullest, each in their own way. Obviously, if someone started thinking that everything was futile because in the end everyone dies, that would be a bit complicated, since there was no cure for that. And she added that she was sure Arinda didn't really think that way. The protagonist admitted to herself that it was true, that since she had entered the world of that novel, she had never decided to give up. Every situation until now was closer to the thought that since her death was certain, she should live as much as possible. Then wondering why, right now, when she had escaped the shadow of death, she was worrying so much. Apparently, her first deaths were finally starting to shake her a little. She then hugged Serena tightly, declaring that from now on she would focus on her future. Seeing the same scene repeat, Luke pointed out that it happened pretty early this time. Serena greeted him and asked if he had studied for the history test. Mocking, the protagonist said it wasn't like he ever studied, and irritated, she commented that her future depended solely on him. Luke countered, asking if the same didn't apply to her. Arinda explained that his focus was becoming the head of the magic tower, while she could be expelled at any moment, so the two of them were in completely different leagues. Luke laughed and declared that as his partner, no one would dare to expel her so easily. Arinda repeated his name, and then the young man held her hand, pointing out that he would never leave her, and that he had worked hard to find a partner like her. Confused, the girl asked what he meant by a partner like her. Luke joked that it was someone capable of making him laugh. Entering the classroom, the protagonist was about to say that he was strange, but as soon as she opened the door, all the students looked over. Sitting in her chair, she wondered if all those stares were because of the test incident where she had been accused of cheating. Someone approached, calling her attention. A girl then asked if she could ask her something. Arinda recognized her as Ginny Clinton. The student explained that she led a study group and wanted to know if Arinda would like to join. Hearing that, the protagonist was shocked, Ginny continued, pointing out that her scores had been perfect on the last exam, and she had even managed to answer several teachers' questions. She also said that she was there on a merit scholarship, so other students wouldn't drag her down or hold her back. In addition, some students from Class C were part of the group, making it easier to exchange ideas and learn together. Ginny then asked if she knew a student named Jackson, son of Count Winston, claiming that recently her fiancé Noah was also considering joining the group. Hearing that and trying to disguise her inner anger, the protagonist answered with a forced smile that she was very sorry but would have to decline the proposal. A little bothered, the girl asked her reason. Thinking for a moment, Arinda mentally listed them. First, there was the chance that that idiot prince would join the group. And second, Ginny had only asked her that when Serena was sitting right next to her. Even though she was also a dedicated student with good grades, she also remembered that the student was the daughter of Count Clinton and that many young nobles participated in the group, including Crown Prince Noah, even if they just called themselves a study group. In the end, it was nothing more than a social club for high-ranking nobles. There was no way Arinda wanted to be involved in politics like that. So she politely said she appreciated the offer, but she was already in a group with her friends and would have to refuse understanding. The girl agreed and left. Serena then smiled and suggested that Arinda should at least try. The protagonist asked what she was talking about. Serena, with a big smile, encouraged her, saying that group study could be a good idea. Inside, Arinda prayed that she would stop smiling like that, or she'd be unable to refuse. A little later, two students were talking while walking around campus. One of them commented that he had heard Arinda Maleficent had gotten a perfect score on the exam. The other wanted to know who had said that. The first explained that he had heard the professor himself talking about it in the office. The second doubted it, remembering that Arinda hadn't done well on the entrance exam, insinuating that maybe she had cheated Arinda and Serena were right nearby, witnessing the whole conversation. While drinking water, Arinda thought she could hear them clearly. Then she told Serena not to worry, dramatically adding that talented people always suffered from loneliness. Impressed, Serena said that Arinda really did seem cool. At that moment, Reynold arrived asking how she was feeling that day. Standing up and smiling, the girl said that now she didn't get as tired after training and that her stamina had improved a lot. Reynold agreed, but the protagonist was bothered by how slow his response was, as if he didn't think her progress was that impressive. The swordsman then warned her not to forget to get enough sleep, reminding her that she had been overworking herself lately. Smiling at that, she asked if they couldn't reduce the intensity of training a little. Reynold ignored her suggestion and turned to Serena, asking if they should go have dinner at the dining hall, and if it was already open. Serena replied that she didn't know either. Realizing what the swordsman had done, Arinda was surprised, wondering if he was becoming like Luke. Then she smiled to herself, touched, thinking that Reynold also avoided certain things. She reflected that Reynold, Luke, and Serena didn't exist like this in the novel, but now they were there by her side, feeling grateful for having replaced Arinda Maleficent and for them helping her accept her own reality in that life. So she ran to the two of them, asking them to wait for her because she was coming too. A few moments later, Reynold commented that it would be better if she didn't give her salad to Serena at dinner that day. Arinda limited herself to answering that she would think about it. Serena added that from that moment on, she had also decided not to eat unhealthy food anymore. But then she paused for a moment, soon commenting that they should look at something. When she looked to the side, the protagonist was startled, questioning what that was. She wondered why those two were together. Noah shot her a sidelong glance, and William, her brother, began waving cheerfully. Moving forward, the girl stated that they should just ignore them and go. But then Reynold grabbed her arm, asking if those two were bothering her, and that if they were, she could tell him. Curious, Arinda asked if he intended to teach them a lesson, thinking that if that happened, it would not only lead to his expulsion, but could even result in the death penalty, since one of them was literally the nation's prince. With a calm expression, the boy simply said he would if she wished. Embarrassed, Arinda asked him not to do that, and when questioned, she explained that William was her older brother and Noah her fiancé. For a second, Reynold suddenly stopped walking. Surprised that she had a fiancé, the protagonist pointed out that she intended to break off the engagement before graduation and also planned to cut all ties with her family. She then asked why that surprised him so much. Embarrassed, he looked away, trying to cover it up by saying that it hadn't. Still at the academy, William placed himself in front of the protagonist, commenting that he never saw her around. The girl thought that he had certainly only come to see Serena. Arinda said, ironically, that maybe that was because she tried her best to avoid his unpleasant face. After the provocation, William asked if she really had no filter since she was insulting him directly. Seeing her brother trying to look inside the classroom, Arinda concluded that he really was only there for her friend and stood in his way, thinking he wouldn't be able to see her. Suddenly, bubbles began to appear out of nowhere. Luke had cast an illusion spell. All of this thanks to the fact that he could conjure semi-permanent illusions as if it were nothing. William told Arinda that the crown prince had said she was trying to break off the engagement. Hearing that, the protagonist complained, saying that Noah had talked too much her brother asked her to pay more attention to what she said, reminding her that she would be queen in the future and should therefore be more aware of what was happening around her. With a serious look, the girl only thought that it would be great if that were true, but it wasn't going to happen. William insisted, saying he didn't know why she was so upset, but that the crown prince was willing to try to make her change her mind. Turning indignantly, the girl was confused by that. He also added that if Noah were to see her, his sister should be a little more composed in her posture. And walking away, he said that she was no longer a child and that this was no joke, adding that breaking off the engagement was completely out of the question. Arinda was silently irritated, replaying what he had just said. After all, asking her not to be upset and to try to act better without even knowing the reason was at the very least revolting. She doubted whether Noah would really try to make her change her mind, concluding that even if she accepted, she would never believe he would actually do that, right after Arinda was surprised, thinking he would never do something like that. Noah then said that he didn't know her tastes, and that was why he had prepared all possible arrangements, bringing countless gifts. He also said that William had commented that girls liked that kind of gesture. The protagonist then said that the two of them were like bread from the same loaf. Frustrated, she asked Noah if he didn't feel guilty about the taxpayers' money he was wasting. Proudly, he said it would be an investment that would pay off in the end. After all, if Arinda changed her mind, the imperial family would benefit greatly. His words irritated her even more, as if he were trying to buy her with that. The protagonist directly said that she hated both him and his gifts. Finally asking him to take everything and leave, Noah asked what exactly it was about him that irritated her so much, pointing out that if it was just because she had been ignored, he could apologize, even asking forgiveness for trying to threaten her with execution, saying it was rude of him, adding that before he hadn't understood her true worth. Incredulous, the girl wondered if he was really listening to her, or if he was simply ignoring every word she said. She said she was about to vomit, pointing out that she was going to go inside, then asking that when he left, Noah take the gifts with him. Holding the door, the prince stated that he hadn't finished speaking yet, and that if she closed the door, he would send double the gifts in the morning, a truly intimidating threat. Hearing that, the protagonist couldn't contain her laughter. Snapping her fingers, the girl declared that she didn't care how many gifts there were. She would simply burn them all to ashes right in front of him, invoking her magic over them. Surprised by the sudden change, the prince noticed something. Seeing Arinda's hair turning white, she herself looked at her strands and thought ironically that she was quite unstable. After all, this effect happened even when using just a little magic. Angrily, the protagonist added that he should get out of her sight unless he wanted to be burned too, claiming she was fine with following through on that idea. At that moment, Luke appeared from behind, calling out for Arinda. Wrapping his arm around her, the mage quickly dissipated all the magic in the room. Pressing her head, Luke said he had asked her not to use magic for a while, also asking if she had hurt herself anywhere. With her face squished, the girl replied no. Worried, Luke then complained that she really never listened to him. He remarked that the headmistress would arrive soon, warning that the protagonist should leave before getting into more trouble. The students around watched curiously, whispering among themselves, asking why magic had been used and what was going on. The girl tried to defend herself, pointing out that Noah wasn't letting her reject his gifts. But mid-sentence, Arinda began to feel drowsy, quickly collapsing in Luke's arms from the strain and fainting right there. A teacher passing by shouted, demanding to know what had happened. Luke immediately took the blame, saying that he had set the fire. The teacher was furious and ordered him to write an apology letter and clean the corridor for an entire week elsewhere. The protagonist told Luke he didn't need to have taken the blame, reminding him that he had said he only wanted to be her partner because she was fun. The boy then asked if he should have let his partner take responsibility after fainting. As she looked at him, Arinda thought that the Luke from the original book would have done exactly that, since he was initially someone who only watched from the sidelines. She remarked that he didn't need to go so far from now on, since she always felt guilty for him having to carry that burden. Smiling, Luke just said there was nothing to worry about, and laughing loudly like a little devil, he promised he wouldn't forget to collect her help in return. Hearing that, Arinda felt a chill down her spine. Serena interrupted them, turning serious and asking everyone to focus on their studies. Luke complained, saying she wasn't any fun. Also wondering why they were even studying during lunch, he went on to tease Reynold, saying that in truth only one person there needed to study, hinting about Class B. Ignoring him, the swordsman turned to the protagonist, saying he hadn't understood a question. She asked which one the protagonist thought Reynold really was, running in circles around Luke. The young mage irritated at being ignored. The girl could no longer trust the story of the original novel. After all, the closer she got to the characters, the more she discovered their hidden natures. She wondered how this interaction had affected her feelings for Serena, but the protagonist still felt somewhat bad, since she didn't actually want to influence her emotions. She believed Reynold would be able to make Serena happy, and that she couldn't deprive her of that happiness. so she advised the swordsman to ask Serena, who cheerfully offered to help. As she watched them both, Arinda silently wished they would keep talking and eventually fall in love, arguing that Reynold was a good man she would always trust. At that moment, Luke leaned in and whispered in her ear, asking if she wanted to get out of there, which left her a little confused. Luke said the truth was that she already knew everything and there was nothing worth reading there, suggesting it would be better if she spent that time learning to use her magical energy. The protagonist began to consider the idea. Luke then stated that it was obvious she wanted to set something up between the other two. Arinda wondered how Luke always knew what she wanted. Laughing, he said that leaving them alone could help, which she ended up nodding in agreement with. Then, with a flash of light, Serena and Reynold noticed something. The mage pointed out that they were going ahead. Even though Serena asked him to wait, he activated his magic. And so the two of them teleported to the magic practice room. Luke held her as they stepped out of the magic circle. Nervous, Arinda began to say that Serena would be really mad, remembering that even though she was sweet, she could still get upset, and that she shouldn't have given in just because Luke offered to teach her magic. Luke laughed, saying she should only worry about one thing at a time. He remarked that normally she was rather indifferent, asking why she cared so much about Eleanor. The protagonist explained that it was because she cared about Serena, and that everyone was like that with the people they liked. Luke laughed again and asked if she worried about her fiancé in the same way. Annoyed, the girl said at that rate she was going to hit him. With that, Luke asked what exactly she liked about Serena. Arinda pointed out that she was beautiful and kind, but Luke countered, explaining that the academy was full of beautiful and kind people. Huffing, she said no one there even came close to her. However, Luke said he wasn't so sure about that, and placing his arms around the desk where Arinda sat, he stated that there was someone just as beautiful sitting right in front of him. Perplexed, the protagonist, with the typical slow reaction speed of an isekai protagonist, didn't understand. Then Luke was as direct as possible, calling her beautiful. Seeing this, the girl wondered if he had lost his mind and quickly denied it, explaining that she was nothing compared to Serena, and Luke started laughing loudly. Irritated, the protagonist believed that all of this was just a joke, asking him to stop shouting and to just get started already. But Luke insisted that he wasn't joking. While she scolded him, he patted her head, agreeing. Embarrassed, she shouted, complaining that Luke had messed up her hair. Placing his hand on her shoulder, he commented that her magical energy had stabilized faster than he expected, and rubbing her head again, Luke said she had trained quite a lot. Sighing, the protagonist said there hadn't been any time to rest while training with Reynold. Luke encouraged her, saying she should keep going, since the abilities she would learn could prove useful, pointing out that she would need competent subordinates in the future. Arinda agreed ironically, calling him Sir, then quickly asked if he would ever accept anything less. The protagonist then wanted to ask him a question, wanting to know how Luke had realized she could use high-level magic since their first meeting. In the original story, Arinda Maleficent always had bad grades and was never able to perform real magic. She herself had only discovered her inner abilities in her second life in that body. So she couldn't understand how Luke Oscar already knew Luke, quickly said that her flow of magical energy was different from everyone else's, explaining that in general, magical energy was low and almost imperceptible, but in her case it was very different. Her flow was similar to the level of already graduated students. Adding that to the fun of watching her challenge the prince, she was the perfect partner. Arinda remarked that if that was really the reason he had chosen her as his partner, in the end it might not be very profitable for him. Running his hand through her hair as he spoke, Luke replied that he didn't know if there was any profit in it, but because of her he was very happy right now. Then hugging her, which left the protagonist frozen in surprise, Luke went on saying that in that case he wouldn't mind cleaning hallways for the rest of his life. While he fiddled with the necklace, Arinda said she could do that herself, but he said he was already done, holding the necklace in his hands. The girl blushed, thinking he seemed different from his usual enthusiasm, and because he was so quiet, it left her feeling a bit overwhelmed. The boy asked if they should continue from where they had left off, but Arinda worried that she might faint again, and with the exams coming up, if she couldn't use magic, she would have problems. Luke said there was no chance of that happening, but doubtful, the girl asked if he was sure. He just claimed that if something went wrong, he'd call Reynold Lord Watson, mocking him. Laughing, the protagonist said she liked how that sounded. Leaving Luke at a loss for words, Arinda affirmed she was only teasing. Then she asked if they could begin. She once again gathered her energy into her core. Sitting, Luke guided her to do it more slowly, as if breathing deeply. Little by little, her energy began to flow, and Luke told her to go just a little further. But seeing her expression, he shouted for the protagonist to stop. Rushing over and grabbing the necklace, Luke began to conjure something. The necklace started glowing brightly, and he wondered if it was already finished. Showing her the necklace, he said the girl had done a great job, then pinching her cheek, but something caught his attention. Arinda smiling cutely, Luke unable to look away. With the sound of the bell, the protagonist asked if they should go back, and a little disappointed, Luke agreed, holding her hand. His earlier words still echoed in her mind. After all, really everyone tried to help the ones they cared about. Glancing at her, he began using his magic. Luke said he was starting to understand that, and finally, they teleported. Already in the classroom, Arinda tried to convince Serena, apologizing for suddenly disappearing with Luke, claiming the girl was probably upset. Seeing that she really was a little bothered, the protagonist felt like trash. But Serena asked her to wait a moment after her little emotional blackmail. The girl said that it really hurt her feelings. After all, Arinda had left her completely alone with Reynold, and she was still a bit uncomfortable around him, pointing out that the protagonist knew that. In fact, the protagonist was surprised, thinking to herself that it had already been 2 months since they entered the academy, so she thought Serena would be used to it by now. But she tried to stop thinking that way. Then she swore it would never happen again, even betting Luke's hand as proof of her determination. He then approached from behind her, giving her a tap on the head and asking what his hand had to do with anything. With arms crossed, he said he didn't understand why Eleanor was still upset, and claimed their task was much more important than just reviewing content. Also pointing out that Arinda had agreed, Luke then asked the protagonist to say something, wanting to comment on her idea of leaving both Serena and the boy from Class B alone. However, before she could say more, Arinda covered his mouth and, annoyed, tried to play it off by saying that he was very funny. But inside, she was telling that idiot to shut up. If Serena found out about her plan, she would give her the silent treatment for a long time. Serena, not understanding what was going on, just observed. And Luke, indifferent, reinforced that in the end their work had been much more important and productive than studying. The girl then asked what exactly they had done. Luke said they had restored Arinda's magical energy again. Thanks to that, she would no longer have so much difficulty using magic in the future, no longer running the risk of damaging her body so much. Serena, surprised and happy, asked if that was true. She added that in that case, the protagonist wouldn't faint anymore, and her hair color wouldn't change again. Luke explained that the color would only change if she went beyond her limits, but that once everything stabilized, it would return to normal. Handing Arinda the necklace, he said it contained the limits of her magical energy. As long as she wore it, she wouldn't surpass her natural capacity. She took the necklace, then understood why she had needed to expend so much energy earlier. Serena offered to put it on her, and the girl thanked her. Curious, she asked Luke how much her energy limit had increased since last time. Luke hesitated, remembering that the classmates were watching closely, but Arinda reassured him, saying it was fine to reveal it, thinking to herself that it might even be good if everyone knew she was worthy of the magic tower. Luke then said that with her current magical energy, she wasn't that big of a deal. At her current level, she was already equal to a low-ranked royal mage. For a moment, the girl felt pessimistic, thinking that no matter how hard she worked, she was still below the imperial level. But in the next instant, it clicked. After all, she was still a student and already at that level, far ahead of any common apprentice. The whole class was surprised, and whispers began to spread. Serena, nervous, asked how that couldn't be considered a lot to him. Luke commented that in his league it wasn't much, so he spoke as if it weren't a big deal. Arinda just called him a show-off. The boy then explained that her body had no natural limits, which was why her magical energy was about 100 times greater than that of a normal person. If not for that, she would still be at the average level of a newly graduated student. Arinda protested, asking him not to explain in such detail. Laughing, he held a lock of her hair between his fingers, saying he was just being kind. The protagonist glared at him, suspicious, thinking silently that he might be hiding something when she was about to ask him something. Luke raised his voice and told everyone to get ready because the teacher was about to arrive. He then leaned close to Arinda's ear and whispered, actually, what he meant earlier was a mage of the magic tower, not a royal mage. And to be clear, a high-ranking mage. The girl asked why he hadn't said that earlier. Hearing that, Luke said they would see about that later, and smiling, gave a light tap on Arinda's head, commenting that the whole truth would only attract insects. The protagonist asked if he really thought she would attract them even like that. Then Luke said that a low-ranked royal mage wasn't impressive at all. Arinda grumbled, wondering how they would deal with his arrogance. Luke declared in a wild tone that he couldn't tolerate insects at all, but the girl reminded him that she was the one who would be bothered by them. Luke confirmed, saying he knew Arinda sighed, repeating the phrase in her mind, and Serena beside her commented that it was interesting. The protagonist turned to her, confused, asking what was interesting about that, but Serena only said it was nothing. Even she already understood what was going on. Unlike Arinda, whose perception was about that of an average brick, Soon the entire academy began talking about Arinda's magical powers. Luke said it wasn't that impressive, but to the other students, the title of Royal Mage sounded far too grand. A student approached her at lunchtime and asked if he could request something. Arinda thought to herself that now they were starting to bother her even during meals. Seeing this, Luke also got annoyed, sighing. Then he conjured a magical bubble around them. The boy asked what that was, and Luke explained that no one could cross that barrier except them. Already irritated, Arinda asked Luke what he thought of the situation. He replied that he shouldn't have compared her powers to those of a royal mage, but rather to those of a common mage. The girl also silently acknowledged that the fault was partly hers, since she had asked him to say that. In front of the class, Serena interrupted, saying that because of this confusion, they barely had time to talk now. The protagonist agreed, remembering that they hadn't even managed to form their study group. Serena made a troubled expression, saying she felt like she was losing her. Arinda thought her jealousy was still kind of cute. Reynold commented that even during training, other students came up to her, bombarding her with questions, wanting to understand why the protagonist remembered that he normally kept his distance. So if even the swordsman had noticed the situation, it was already serious. Luke pointed out that he had misspoken, and now a bunch of insects wouldn't stop swarming around her. Reynold didn't get it at first, so Serena explained that the mage had declared in front of the entire class that Arinda's magical power was comparable to that of a royal mage. The young man asked what that meant, and Arinda explained that it was like being a swordsman at the level of a royal knight. Then he understood quickly, adding that she was more impressive than he had imagined. Luke teased, asking what that meant in relation to him, and Reynold grimaced, saying he didn't care. Luke got annoyed, saying that was why he hated swordsmen. Ignoring him, Reynold asked if, since her magical ability was so powerful, maybe she should raise her swordsmanship until it was at the same level. After hearing that, Arinda made a face and said no, absolutely not, remembering that Reynold was just being himself after all, just an idiot fully fulfilling the literary scope of an impulsive and short-sighted male lead. Then, when he started something, the boy would go all the way. In short, he was as stubborn as a mule. At another moment, Arinda was panting, gasping for air as she spoke, complaining that this was becoming unbearable, and Reynold retorted, saying it was even harder when she talked. Arinda grumbled that he was absolutely heartless and kept running. The girl wondered how she had ended up there. After all, in the original book, Reynold had promised to protect Serena forever and never let her lift a finger. But there she was, running across the field with sandbags on her feet. She understood that we treat friends and the people we like differently. But even so, she remembered Serena confessing that she still felt uncomfortable around Reynold, wondering what his opinion of the girl was. If she had the power to read feelings like Serena, maybe she would already understand his heart. But she remembered that her power didn't work that way. She still couldn't say who liked whom. After all, she would only master emotion detection shortly before graduation, and now all she could do was sense the general feeling. Suddenly, Reynold grabbed her, lost in these thoughts. Arinda hadn't noticed she was about to crash into the training blades. He asked if she was okay, pointing out that he had called her but got no response. But the protagonist admitted with an awkward laugh that she hadn't been paying attention. The swordsman then suggested she rest a little, and holding her hand, he asked her to sit there. Thrown down on the grass, Arinda was laughing a little. He looked at her curiously and asked why the girl said it was because he wasn't a robot after all. For while they ran, he seemed so calm, but he was drenched in sweat too. Searching in her pockets, she thought she had probably kept Serena's handkerchief. When she found it, she used it to wipe his sweat, but he tried to refuse, saying he could do it himself. Reynold still asked if she always carried a handkerchief around. Arinda pointed out that Serena had given it to her, remembering when the girl apologized for not being able to train together and handed her that very handkerchief. The protagonist thought about how kind and considerate she was, and that was exactly why she liked her so much. Taking the opportunity to bring up the subject, she asked if Reynold didn't agree that Serena was a sweet person. Commenting on how she woke her up early every morning to keep her from oversleeping, the swordsman smiled and simply said that the protagonist wasn't much of a morning person. She answered embarrassed that yes. But anyway, she said, Serena always brought bread from the cafeteria because she skipped breakfast. Reynold then asked her what kind of bread she liked, more interested in Arinda than in anything else. The girl told him she preferred blueberry with cream cheese and went back to praising Serena, saying she always forgave her when she made mistakes. Finally, she got to the real point, recalling the time she had teleported with Luke and left the two of them behind, explaining that Serena had been mad, but later happy to know her magical energy had stabilized. Turning his face, the swordsman admitted she was wrong for leaving them behind like that. Realizing her mistake, the girl tried to cover it up, reinforcing that what she really meant was how sweet Serena was. The boy said he knew Eleanor was a good person, but added that Arinda had been wrong with them that day. Awkwardly, the protagonist thought to herself that he always dodged the subject. And still she insisted, saying Serena had a natural charm. Soon the girl would open her own fan club for her. Reynold agreed that she was attractive, and Arinda smiled satisfied, asking if that was really so. But then the swordsman added that beings of the same kind, like birds, usually stayed together, pointing out that Arinda was just as attractive as she was, leaving her surprised. He continued, adding that he knew her feelings better than anyone and that she didn't need to worry. She agreed, but in her mind, she wondered if those words were because he already liked Serena or because there was someone else on his mind. If it was the latter, it could only mean one thing. Analyzing Reynold's relationships one by one, she reached only one possible conclusion. The only person left was herself. The shock hit her male protagonists falling in love with the same character was a literary device often used to move a plot forward, but that was no guarantee of anything, and she might just be mistaken and deluding herself. After all, how could the protagonist, a mere villainess, accept all the love that was destined for the heroine of the story? She couldn't feel satisfied with that, as if it didn't really belong to her. While she was lost in those thoughts, Reynold waved his hand in front of her and asked what she was thinking about so much. Arinda quickly answered that nothing, trying to cover it up. The boy just said it was fine to let her mind wander when they were together, but if she walked alone like that, she could end up getting hurt. To change the subject, she asked what they were serving for dinner that night. Reynold pointing out that Eleanor had said there would be hamburger steak. She found it strange that Reynold knew the menu while she had no idea, and commented in surprise. Then the swordsman said he already knew she would ask him that. The protagonist thought in frustration that it was impossible not to get the wrong idea when he said things like that, wondering if he only saw her as a friend or if not, maybe it would be better to end everything at once. Unsure if she should ask him directly and worried about the possible results. Seeing her troubled, Reynold asked if something had happened. She nervously replied, no, that it was nothing. In her mind, the protagonist pictured Serena and remembered her priority, promising herself she would do anything so that Serena's heart wouldn't break, as long as it wasn't Noah. She wanted to see her happy speak of the devil. He appeared right behind her, calling her name. She screamed in fright, but Noah only approached, asking if she was going to have dinner. The girl wondered why he was incapable of leaving her alone. After all, she had already made it perfectly clear that she hated him, even considering that Noah might be a masochist. When she was about to complain angrily, Reynold stepped between them, asking seriously if there was anything he could help with. Noah frowned bitterly and muttered that last time it was Luke Oscar, and now it was that man. Arinda thought to herself that Luke was her partner, and therefore could intervene, but Reynold was playing with fire by interfering. So she stopped him, thanking him for his willingness, but saying that this was a personal matter she would resolve on her own. Standing before the crown prince, she replied, yes, that she planned to have dinner, but now she had lost her appetite. Noah remarked that he still saw in her the same anger as before. Arinda shot back, calling him shameless, reminding him that she had already told him to disappear from her sight, and asking if it hadn't been clear enough. Using his ultimate card, the prince simply claimed he was her fiancé, asking if she shouldn't avoid dating other people. The protagonist exploded in irritation, telling him he could die on graduation day, and that he should worry about making the most of the precious life he still had left. Noah remained serious and said he had come for an important reason and would be happy if she took him seriously. Seeing his expression, she wondered what that heavy look meant. Noah then began to say he was certain she had liked him before, reminding her that the last letter she had written said exactly the same thing. At those words, Reynold clenched his fist tightly, trying to control the rage growing inside him. Arinda realized they had apparently gotten into trouble. Noah asked how her heart could have changed so much. The protagonist remembered the past and murmured to herself that he would never understand. Even when he tried to kill her, it was only a lost fragment of his future. But for her, that was a reality she had to endure not once, but twice. So of course she would have some repulsion. Facing Noah, she blurted out that she hated him and that there was nothing more to say. Turning, the girl asked Reynold that they leave there. But behind her, she heard Noah declare that he would wait for her and that it wasn't any sort of political scheme. The words struck her mind like hot iron, so she cut him off sharply, ordering him not to say another word. In her mind, the girl repeated that she didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to listen to that cliché dialogue that sounded copied from every romance. Then she heard from him that his interest in her had only grown. Arinda swore Noah was the last person she wanted to hear that from. In romances, it was common for the protagonist to end up falling in love with the one who had killed her in her first life, all as part of a very generic plot. And then she forgave him upon discovering he had changed. But that wasn't their case. That was only possible when one still had feelings for the other. Unfortunately, there was no redemption left for them. Arinda asked how he dared to speak of interest. He was the same person who had killed her twice. The same hand, the same fate. She wondered if it was possible to let go of that burning hatred. Her reality was already completely out of sync with the world of that book. The memories tangled in her head, she recalled the moment Noah condemned her, saying he hated her, that he couldn't tolerate her. She didn't care anymore. She just couldn't accept anything that came from him. Remembering that even in this recent life, just like the others, he still wished for her death. If she hadn't actively tried to change that fate, she would surely have died again by his hand. And now this same person came to speak of interest without any shame. She wondered if, since no one remembered each detail of that, did that mean it hadn't happened? She asked herself if someone could really change their nature after all that. She whispered, calling him a crazy bastard, anger taking over her, catching him by surprise. In her mind, she reaffirmed that people didn't change, that no change could erase 2 deaths, all that suffering. Then she said in fury that he had lost his mind. Noah, instead of backing down, began to say that maybe it was because he had threatened her with hanging, that if that was the case, he shouldn't have been upset, that everything had been said in the heat of the moment. He went on saying he didn't understand her, that clearly those feelings of hers were pure hatred, but Noah couldn't see the reason. He didn't understand how she could hate him so much, and he asked who had made her that way. He doubted if it could be because he hadn't broken off the engagement, or even because he approached her despite being treated badly. And he came closer still, reducing the distance between them. Noah declared that there was nothing wrong with acting according to what one had, reminding her that this was the logic behind their relationship. Hearing those words, Arinda thought he was right, that of course Noah couldn't comprehend her current situation. She was the only one who suffered and remembered all that, so to everyone else she would only seem to be acting disturbed. She asked herself if it wouldn't have been better to remain silent, or simply stay away from him as she had in her previous life, biting her lip in frustration. The protagonist knew that if she did that, deep down nothing would have changed. Noah would have ended her life again. At that point, what was she supposed to do with her hatred and anger toward him? She wondered if everything was her fault. While she was lost in thought, Noah noticed something strange, warning her about her hair. Her mind went blank under the flood of thoughts and sensations, murmuring that she felt like vomiting at that moment. Clutching her chest, she couldn't even breathe, her body heavy. She just wanted to leave that place. Suddenly, Luke appeared, stepping out of a portal and calling her name. Holding her hand as he floated, he pointed out that they should go. With that, she simply let herself be carried, closing her eyes. And when she opened them again, she was in a completely different place. Luke gently scolded her, reminding her that she hadn't eaten yet and told her to stay put there. Moments later, he disappeared, only to return seconds after, placing bread in front of her. Arinda asked how he knew where she was. The boy only explained that he had felt a disruption in her magical energy flow. Surprised, the protagonist asked if he could sense that even from such a distance. To which Luke replied, yes, as long as she was within the Academy's range. Though beyond that it would be more difficult, but the Academy was simply enormous. Sensing even the slightest fluctuation of magic, there was simply insane. The girl asked if he had brought her here already knowing what had happened, but Luke quickly denied it. He only knew that at that moment her wish was to get away, then handed her a bag, offering the bread. Immediately after, he placed something into her mouth. Luke explained that when a mage's stress levels rose, there was a risk of losing control over magical energy. And while Arinda ate, Luke asked if she was even aware of her body's current state. He reminded her to be as careful as possible. The necklace he had given would help, but prevention was always better than cure. The protagonist then asked if he wasn't curious about what had left her in that state. Luke then asked if she would tell him if he was. Arinda hesitated for a moment, but said Luke already knew she hated the Crown Prince, which he confirmed without hesitation. At that moment, she nervously began wondering how she could tell him what she truly carried in her heart. She asked herself if she should simply tell Luke that she had entered that romance only to die as the villainess. But even when she tried to live peacefully the second time, she had still met the same fate. She considered revealing that Noah was behind it all and that this was the real reason for her deep hatred. Her thoughts consumed her until Luke, in his calm manner, said she could take as much time as she wanted. Arinda finally admitted she had her own reasons but couldn't put them into words in front of him. So she murmured that maybe it sounded strange, but it wasn't only because of what had already happened. Noah had changed. He now said he wanted to know her, and that made her feel strangely guilty. She hated him, and yet he kept asking why. She didn't know what to answer, nor if it was fair to hold so much resentment against someone who, in this life, hadn't actually done anything yet. Luke then asked if she believed others would understand her reasons. The protagonist replied, yes, if they believed her. Then Luke asked why she was holding back. If no one would trouble her, why should she bear it all alone? His words made her reflect. He was right. Why should it always be her who backed down? Noah had killed her without hesitation, even when she left Serena behind. She had every reason to hate him. Why give that up now? Luke smiled softly and said she should do whatever she wanted, and that no matter the decision, he would believe in her. The boy only added that it wasn't him she needed to believe in, but herself, pointing out she shouldn't drown in that confusion. Arinda then thought she should listen to what her heart truly wanted. Even if she made a mistake, at least it would be her own choice, deciding she would no longer hold back, even if it meant becoming a bad person if she had to. A faint smile appeared as she thanked him because he had really helped her sort out her thoughts. Seeing that she had improved a little, Luke began to vent as well, telling her to stop confronting Noah at every encounter. After all, the idiot there did everything to face him head-on and answer when she could have just ignored him. That was why Noah kept trying. The protagonist acknowledged that he was right again. She was giving Noah far too much attention. At that moment, something settled inside her, and as Luke caressed her, she realized it wasn't he who needed her. It was she who needed his presence. So she asked if Luke knew he was a great partner. Full of himself, the boy agreed, claiming there would never be another like him. Jokingly, Arinda asked him to forget it, pointing out that she preferred Serena, but Luke shot back irritably, reminding her that he had even brought her bread. He extended his hand. Arinda took it, exchanging with him a smile that lightened the tension between them. Already in the dining hall, the four of them sat together at the table, Arinda sweating as Reynold kept a serious gaze. The truth was, the girl had been so focused on leaving that in the process, Reynold had been left behind again. Placing her fork on the table, Arinda broke the silence and asked if he was angry. Inside, she already suspected the answer. She was sure he was upset. After all, Reynold had told her he felt that way the last time. He wasn't even touching his food, and that made her uncomfortable. Reynold said he wasn't angry with her, but nervously, the girl then asked why he was staring at her with such an angry expression, pointing out that he had almost killed her with his eyes. He apologized for worrying her and confessed that in truth, he was angry at himself. Reynold said he should have at least taken her out of there or even punched Noah. Shocked, Arinda warned him that Noah was the crown prince. That would certainly be a death sentence. She remembered that Reynold might have come from a common family, but still, he should know that her fiancé was the crown prince. Yet she recalled that might not be true. After all, on the day they met, he had no idea who Arinda Maleficent was. Most knew that black hair and golden eyes belonged only to that lineage. A little absent-minded, Reynold said that, thinking back, he remembered her red eyes. The boy really didn't know the prince was her fiancé. Apologizing for not explaining properly, the protagonist asked him to be more careful. He promised to be careful next time, and that unsettled her. After all, he was already planning the next confrontation. Then it clicked. Arinda asked if he had done what she was thinking. Embarrassed and scratching his neck, he admitted he hadn't hit him that hard. The protagonist thought he shouldn't be blushing while saying something like that, calling him a delinquent. The scenario she feared most had materialized. Even though she had stepped in earlier to prevent it, it had all been in vain. Luke, amused, commented that it had been a good decision to let him act. Annoyed, Arinda immediately told him to shut up. He kept laughing at the situation. Awkwardly, she turned back to Reynold, asking if he realized the seriousness of what he had done. He firmly replied that he had punched the crown prince. Arinda, stunned, tried to explain that he wasn't exactly wrong, but it wasn't that simple. Yet Serena intervened, calmly explaining that the girl was only worried about the possible consequences. The protagonist, relieved at being understood, praised her in her mind, adding that harming the royal family was a serious crime. Arinda explained that beyond that, Noah had a twisted personality, recalling he had threatened to kill her earlier. With a sulky expression, she told Serena he was a terrible man and asked her not to forget it. Serena, amused by the exaggeration, replied that she understood, but that wasn't the time to argue about it. She suddenly shouted Reynold's name, startling him, warning him that as a knight, he couldn't resort to violence whenever he wished. Besides, Noah wasn't an ordinary person. He was the crown prince, and things would not end simply. Luke, indifferent, said he liked what Reynold had done and would take care of erasing the prince's memories. So irritated she could punch him, the protagonist called his name. Luke then said he would shut his mouth from now on. Someone added that it really wasn't good for him to use his strength that way. But Reynold remained firm, acknowledging that resorting to violence was wrong. Yet he cut Arinda off, because after all, everyone was saying he shouldn't have done it only because Noah was the prince. Clenching his fists, he admitted that even if he had known beforehand, he would have made the same decision. And if ever in the same situation again, he would punch him once more if necessary, leaving the protagonist speechless. Reynold still insisted that it was all because Noah had hurt her. Hearing those words, she reflected that the fault was hers. She thought that receiving more love than she deserved only brought trouble for everyone. She imagined that accidents like this could happen again, and maybe her friends would end up hurt because of her. She knew how the story was supposed to proceed, so to make sure they'd be safe, she at least needed to establish a plan. Feeling saddened, she thanked Reynold for his feelings, but declared that if anyone was to teach Noah a lesson, that person would be herself. still on the academy grounds. In the library, the protagonist was studying attentively beside Serena, while Reynold, in silence, never took his eyes off her. Luke, on the other hand, looked bored, twirling a pencil absent-mindedly in the air. Serena, smiling, asked if they weren't going to prepare for the exams, but Arinda immediately noticed that was her most threatening smile. Mentally begging Reynold to look back at his book, embarrassed, he lowered his gaze to the pages. Right after, she turned toward Luke and thought he never understood the atmosphere of the room. He always provoked Serena, and what bothered her the most was that the girl, even after so many provocations, remained silent, calmly observing him. Her anger rising, she called Luke's attention and demanded he put down the pencil and focus. The mage, in response, tossed the object even higher into the air and proudly declared he didn't need to study. The protagonist declared that if he intended to stay there in the library, he should at least dedicate himself to something. Luke, puffed up with pride, retorted that there was no need for him to study. After all, he was the one who had created the blue magical barrier to drive away students who disturbed her while she studied. She shot back disdainfully that she could also do something like that. Luke replied that that kind of magic, a barrier that completely isolated the area, was only taught at the magic tower. She insisted she wanted to see the formula, reminding him of his promise to share a special spell, warning that she would need less than 10 seconds. Luke, challenging her, asked what she could do in so little time. Calling him arrogant, she said she just wanted to check the complexity of the magic and pressed him to show it. In the end, he gave in and demonstrated the formula, projecting blue letters into the air before them. Arinda watched intently. Finally, the letters began to distort. Serena surprised that he really only kept them for 10 seconds. The girl thought he was a cold idiot, but if it was that simple, she could easily reproduce it. Confident, she told Luke that if she managed to reproduce the magic, then he would have to focus on studying from now on. Determined, she didn't hesitate, conjuring the spell, reminding herself that her memory wasn't weak. After all, she was the same girl who had memorized an entire novel before. In just a few seconds, she repeated the spell, and the magical barrier appeared before everyone's eyes. Serena, excited, exclaimed in surprise at the feat, while Luke looked on in disbelief. Proud, Arinda replied that she had done it using her incredible skills, demanding they return to studying. But Luke remained stunned. He confessed he had never seen anyone pull that off, not even in the magic tower, and questioned whether it was really time to talk about studying. The protagonist insisted that now was the perfect time to study, ordering him to sit up straight. She went up to him and demanded he open his notebook, telling him to sit properly and start writing properly. With no patience for his provocations, she added they could talk about anything else only after studying. Laughing, she asked Serena if things were okay now. She thanked her, saying Arinda was really very cool. Luke, in turn, muttered that it hadn't been anything special, but she cut him off, telling him to be quiet and concentrate too, saying the same to Reynold. The girl reflected silently that it would be a good idea to practice likely exam questions, especially for Serena and Reynold, since he had failed several times in the past, doubting that would have any major impact on the story. With that, she thought she could save him from a flood of F grades. She even told them all that she would prepare a book with questions likely to appear on the exam and that they should read it carefully. Serena said she would love that, but asked if her hand wouldn't hurt with all that effort. The protagonist calmly replied it wasn't a problem, since Luke could use cloning magic on the pages. Luke protested, saying she was now openly using him. Dispelling his magic, Luke added that she shouldn't use her mana until it stabilized, since she had just recovered. With an unusual gesture, he pulled a book from his belt. Curious, she asked why he was doing that. He showed the book and declared he was keeping it hostage, reminding her she had promised to talk after the studies. A little later, as they walked through the corridors, Arinda warned Luke that class would begin soon. He replied indifferently, asking if that really mattered. He wanted to know if that class was more important than himself. The protagonist said obviously yes, explaining that if they arrived late, they'd be punished and forced to run penalty laps. Luke, disdainful, declared he could write the formula for memory erasing magic if necessary. That left her appalled, wondering how he could do something that insane. Asking herself if there was any chance that idiot had already erased her memories before, her expression made him curious. He asked her how it was possible that she remembered the barrier formula so quickly, wondering since when she had been able to pull off such feats. The girl, proud, replied that she was smart and asked if she really had to explain that to him. Luke ended up agreeing, saying he didn't disagree, but pointed out that she was the one who had brought up the subject. He then raised the book toward her and said she should have told him earlier about all that talent. The protagonist asked why, and Luke was about to reveal something but held back, saying only that it could have been more fun. Those words put him in trouble, as Arinda reacted furiously, asking if he had really said fun. He shot back that she should share that with her partner immediately, reminding her that there was such a thing as trust. Out of patience, the girl said she hadn't been born just to entertain him, so Arinda began to walk off angrily, saying she was leaving because she didn't want to be late for class. Luke tried to stop her, claiming he hadn't meant it that way. When she insisted on leaving, unwilling to hear his excuses, Luke held her hand and said they didn't need to run. A blue glow appeared around them, confirming Luke as the Academy's best Uber. In the next instant, the two of them were already in the classroom. Serena greeted them, saying she had kept their notebooks safe just in case. The teacher entered, greeting the class with a good afternoon. Luke called for Arinda, but she didn't answer, choosing instead to sit sulking with her arms crossed. She then began to write something in silence, conversing with Serena through the notebook. Serena noticed the tension and asked if the two of them had fought. She replied no, that she was just upset. The heroine said Luke seemed to have a problem too, maybe because he was sad that she had replaced his barrier earlier. Serena thought for a moment, then asked if maybe it was because she hadn't told him about her talents. The protagonist shot back, saying she hadn't been hiding anything, and if she had, she wouldn't have destroyed his barrier in the first place. Serena insisted that Luke was probably hurt because she hadn't told him directly. The protagonist complained that Luke had said if he'd known sooner, he would have had more fun. Serena then wrote that Arinda mattered to him more than she thought, pointing out that Arinda knew Luke didn't open up easily. Still in a bad mood, the protagonist thought that didn't justify anything. Since he was the one who had said something stupid, he should take responsibility for his own words. Serena then noticed something, saying she agreed Luke had made a mistake. But Arinda shouldn't take it personally. Suddenly, something fell on her desk. Opening the letter, she quickly realized it was from Luke and began to read. In it, he wrote that from that moment on, they would meet in magic training class after her sword practice. Luke reminded her that he had promised to teach her the magic passed down in the magic tower. The girl replied, asking why all of a sudden after refusing before. Luke said he believed she hadn't been ready for it earlier. She just nodded in agreement, thinking it made sense. Later, in the dining hall, the four of them were together again at dinner. Serena observed that Arinda seemed to be becoming proficient in training. The protagonist, confused by the sudden topic, soon smiled when Serena reminded her that before she could barely lift a spoon during meals. The girl said she was now getting used to it, to the point of feeling sore even when she didn't practice. Hearing this, Reynold quickly suggested increasing her training load, but she immediately asked him to forget what she just said, fearing she might collapse. Reynold remained serious and stated that Arinda was very capable and that they could train together. Hearing that, she blushed, surprised, asking if really together. Luke interrupted, saying absolutely not, because from then on she would learn magic with him after training. Reynold accepted the arrangement and explained that he had no intention of preventing Arinda's learning, whether in swordsmanship or magic, adding that what mattered was that she kept progressing, and that already made him happy. Arinda blushed even more and wondered silently if he was really flirting with her, or something like that. Serena broke the mood by asking if the protagonist would go out again to learn magic after sword practice and dinner. Arinda replied that she shouldn't worry and thought to herself that she had already lived the tough routine of a high school student. This was nothing compared to that hell. She said that when she finished her commitments, she could also make time to study with Serena. Serena smiled happily, saying she'd love that, and Arinda assured her she'd be fine because she also wanted to spend more time with her. Then, holding a plate of salad, Serena was touched and replied that she felt the same, but soon she added playfully that she would no longer eat Arinda's salad from then on, which made them both laugh. The protagonist tried to cover it up, but Serena lightly scolded her, telling her not to be picky with food, and invited Arinda to study in her room after magic training. Luke cut in with a smile and asked if he could come too, but the young woman quickly frowned, asking if he really intended to enter the girls' dormitory. He argued that a clever friend was secretly teaching him things and that he couldn't let the chance slip by, adding that the crown prince had already gone there the other day. Arinda replied that precisely because of that, surveillance was now stricter, accusing Luke of not really being interested in studying. He retorted that from now on he would be interested, and asked Reynold what he thought. Reynold said it wasn't necessary, but Serena commented that maybe he should worry, since in his case there was the risk of failing. Luke laughed with a sparkle in his eyes and announced that he had found a way to get into the dormitory. Seeing his smile, both Serena's and Arinda's faces darkened. The protagonist muttered that she was already prepared for the worst, and her friend agreed. Later that day, in the dormitory, Serena and Arinda were in their pajamas. The protagonist was shocked, wondering how Reynold had actually agreed to it. The worst had become reality, but truth be told, Luke had a weakness for dressing as a woman, and to the nation's surprise, he looked great doing it. Then Luke greeted them in an exaggeratedly feminine tone. He looked incredibly comfortable, but the girls, still wondering if this was even real, couldn't avoid feeling embarrassed. Luke even joked, asking if she wanted to touch, and Arinda slammed the door shut, saying he had gone insane, leaving both of them outside. Luke immediately started shouting for her to hurry and let them in. The protagonist then looked at Serena and asked if they should really allow them inside. Serena shivered at the sight, but at least admired all the effort they had put in. She whispered that she understood why Luke was there, but not why Reynold was, since he was very strict about his bedtime. Finally, she opened the door, saying that since no one would see them inside, they could drop the transformation as soon as they entered. At that moment, Luke's magic wore off and both he and Reynold returned to their original forms. The mage asked if that hadn't been a pleasant surprise. Arinda, startled, rushed to pull them inside, muttering that if they were caught, it would be the end of her. Luke asked if it was really that bad, while Reynold apologized with a guilty look. Sitting at the table, Serena invited them to study. Luke commented that now he could just hang out until he got bored, obviously irritating Arinda with that. A little later, someone asked the protagonist how a magical formula worked. She replied that she would need to see the principle behind it first. Meanwhile, Luke sighed lazily over the table, saying he was bored and asking if anyone really believed he had disguised himself just to study. Arinda coldly replied that had always been the plan, and if he didn't like it, he should just leave. Luke accused her of being cruel and asked if she was really his partner. She shot back, reminding him that he was the one who had come after her like a needy animal in search of a partner, not the other way around. Luke turned to the swordsman, calling him Watson and asking if he didn't also think Arinda was too harsh, but got no answer. Reynold stood still for a moment. Then Luke noticed something. Looking closer, he realized Reynold was already asleep, slumping completely over the table. Serena giggled softly at the sight and asked Luke to carry Reynold to his bed. He grumbled that it would be better to take him back to his own room, but Serena warned that on the way he might be caught by a guard. Let's just ignore the teleportation power Luke had already used more than 10 times by now. So he carried Reynold in his arms, muttering that nothing was worse than waking up in someone else's bed. And with all the care and tenderness in the world, he tossed him onto the mattress. The protagonist pointed out that he had probably been sleepy for a while already, since they had gone past his bedtime. Luke quickly commented that it was finally playtime, only to be scolded right after. Changing the subject, he asked if the two of them would rest, which Serena agreed to. Excited, Luke said then they should finish this quickly. The two, confused, asked what he was talking about, and he said it was about the study group. Sitting down already prepared to help, Arinda still couldn't believe he would take on the teaching part, and he told her to relax and go get some rest. Arinda agreed, knowing that if Serena needed her, she would call her anyway. So the protagonist sat beside Reynold, who was asleep, thinking that if he clasped his hands over his chest, he would look like Sleeping Beauty. She placed his hands that way just to see the sight. Realizing she had never had the chance to look at him in detail, she thought it was incredible to discover this side of the characters that hadn't been mentioned in the book. As she pulled her hand away from his, suddenly she felt something tug at her finger. She asked if Reynold was awake, since he had grabbed her hand. Slowly opening his eyes, he realized Arinda was sitting right there beside him, and he held her hand close to his chest as he drifted back to sleep. And that's it, everyone. That makes 18 chapters. Ugh, that was a lot for just 18 chapters. What did you all think? I'm rooting for the romance to start soon, and it looks like it will start with Reynold, even though I still cheer a bit for Luke. Did you enjoy the story? If we hit 200,000 views, I'll bring part 2. So share it a lot and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. For those who want to know, the story's name is I Will Politely Decline the Male Lead, and as I mentioned, I've covered up to chapter 18. Kisses and see you next time.